Chapter 76. Ceremony. Mr. Niccolo was a well-known wealthy merchant in Gale City, mainly dealing in the grain business, handling 1/10 of the city's grain supply, and was indeed a rich man. This wealthy man had no particular hobbies, except for some normal fun. His most time-consuming interest was in studying witchcraft. This witchcraft was not the kind the Wizard Academy taught, which was proper spells. Instead, these witchcrafts were filled with all sorts of absurd and unrestrained elements. 9 out of 10 were fake, and the remaining one was some incomplete witchcraft left behind. To put how perplexing this hobby was into perspective, it was like a patient ignoring modern medicine and instead seeking out some folk remedies to treat their illness. But Mr. Niccolo remained endlessly enthusiastic, even somewhat obsessed. An unknown secret chamber. Pastor, the police have started investigating us. The short and stout Niccolo knelt on the ground. In front of him, a mysterious figure in a black robe was praying to an altar. What have they discovered? The mysterious person's voice sounded strange, as if many voices were mixed together. The language he spoke was not the wizard language. Niccolo had never heard this language before, but he still understood what was being said. Pastor, our sacrifices are likely to have been exposed. What? A formidable pressure suddenly burst from the mysterious person as Niccolo knelt before him, making Niccolo feel that he was not facing a human, but a demon god who had been sealed. What should we do, my lord? Niccolo said, trembling. What to do? The mysterious person paused. Gather the believers tonight. We can no longer delay the sacrifice. We must hasten the arrival of our Lord. Yes, my lord, I will get on it immediately. After Niccolo left, the mysterious person returned to his previous position. A wave of mental fluctuation emanated from within him. My lord, tonight is the day you break free from shackles and descend upon this world. On the altar, a tiny space rift flickered in and out of visibility. Under the arrangements of the police and the city lord mansion, Richard successfully obtained a new identity, a wandering knight craving power. Using this identity, Richard blended into various taverns to solidify his persona and successfully made contact with the followers of the Crimson Lord, becoming one of them. In the tavern, Richard habitually drank heavily to perfect his image. But soon, a person in red found him. Richard, there is a sacrifice at the church tonight, the person in red whispered into Richard's ear. A sacrifice? Richard pretended to be excited. Does that mean I might receive the Crimson Lord's blessing? The person in red frowned and gestured for Richard to keep his voice down. Of course, each sacrifice brings blessings from the Crimson Lord. How lucky I am then! Internally, the person in red thought Richard was a fool to believe such things. The Crimson Lord's blessing was not so easily bestowed, and even if it was, it certainly wouldn't be for a fool like him. However, the person in red did not express these thoughts, instead feigning envy. You really are lucky, to have joined just in time for a sacrifice. After conveying the message, the person in red left the tavern, while Richard's excited expression gradually morphed into a sneer. Having wasted so much time, I've finally caught the mastermind. Without staying much longer, Richard immediately contacted Spencer to prepare for the evacuation of the civilians. A crazy wizard might act without regard for the lives of civilians, but Richard couldn't. The Academy's mission had a requirement to minimize civilian casualties. 73 9th Street? All right, my lord, I will prepare immediately, Spencer's voice came from the crystal ball. This crystal ball was specially prepared by Richard for this mission at the Wizard Academy. Its function is to transmit sound within 500 meters, essentially a low-grade version of a telephone. However, this gadget also had an advantage: it had almost no magic fluctuations, so Richard was not afraid of his voice transmission being detected by mad wizards. Don't prepare too early, be careful of information leakage, Richard instructed. Don't worry, wizard sir, I can handle such a small matter, the apprentice replied. At night, Richard, cloaked and wearing worn leather armor, carrying his great sword, arrived at the gathering place. The gatekeeper, after confirming Richard's identity, let him in. From the outside, the gathering place looked no different from a normal residence, but beneath it was a huge underground hall. The entire hall could accommodate hundreds of members, with torches and oil lamps hanging from the walls. In the center of the hall was a black stone altar, covered in strange patterns. Normally, those attending the gathering would pray toward this altar. This underground hall had several tunnels connected to it, but unfortunately, Richard never had the chance to explore where these tunnels led. The underground hall's believers kept increasing in number, and soon there were hundreds gathered. These people wore masks and cloaks, making the entire hall resemble a masquerade ball. Soon, everyone had arrived. As the guards closed the entrance to the underground hall, a figure clad in black emerged from the shadows and floated to the center of the hall. "Good evening, faithful believers of the Blood-Red Lord." "Pastor," the crowd bowed in unison toward the figure in black. "I believe you must be curious why I'm rushing the sacrifice, given that it's been less than half a year since our last one." The voice of the figure in black suddenly became more forceful. "Today, I received an oracle from our master, the great Blood-Red Lord. He said the time has come, the time to descend upon mankind and bring us a great cleansing." Upon hearing this news, the whole hall's believers grew excited. Fanatics were somewhat like star chasers, unquestionably thrilled at the prospect of soon seeing their idol. But Richard, standing in a corner, let out a cold laugh. If it weren't for the multitude of people here and the risk of being ambushed by spells from the undead school, he would have liked to kill this ridiculous charlatan right away. An advanced apprentice playing the role of a prophet in a mortal city, really disgracing the face of all wizard apprentices. If only he had a bit of a mad scientist's charisma, even a little bit, Richard wouldn't underestimate him. But this charlatan really lacked it completely. Sacrifice! 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 It started with someone, and soon the whole hall's believers were chanting sacrifice, which greatly irritated Richard. Damn it, believing in a god in a world with wizards, what on earth were these people thinking? The figure in black opened his arms toward the believers, his words growing fervent. "Brothers and sisters, our heaven is about to descend, our Lord will establish an earthly divine country on this land. In the divine country, there will be no poverty, no pain, no sickness, no death, we will revel in joy until the end of time." At the same moment, a secret mental invasion suddenly touched Richard's mind. The figure in black in the sky suddenly shuddered, his gaze instantly turning toward the corner of the hall. "Who are you?" Richard let out a breath and stepped forward, sword in hand. "The one to kill you." Chapter 77. "The one trying to kill me," the man in black suddenly spoke with a venomous tone. "Wizard apprentice of the Wizard Academy." Richard didn't answer, his figure abruptly transformed into a giant covered in black scales, and his great sword burst into fierce black flames. Then, boom! With a whooshing sound of swinging winds, the great sword smashed the man in black into the walls of the hall. At the same time, the civil protection team on the ground also sprang into action. Under the arrangements of City Lord Spencer, the entire civil protection team of Gale City had been summoned here. These robust soldiers, many of whom were knights and skilled in combat, had only one duty in this battle, to evacuate the civilians. Damn it! Rage-filled roars came from within the walls as a blood-red figure burst forth with such speed that the human eye could hardly follow. But Richard, not even looking, swung his sword backward. Boom! Just like that, a mad wizard? Richard scoffed internally as 3 fireballs suddenly appeared beside him. The spell models of these fireballs had been modified by Ali, and each had an energy level of 50. At this moment, the 3 fireballs targeted the cult leader simultaneously and shot towards him. Boom! Richard turned back towards the congregation in the hall and then pulled out a recording crystal ball. "Leave this place at once." The brains of cult believers were not generally good, and after his warning, probably few would listen. Recording it in advance would be useful to provide an explanation to the academy when many ended up dead. If they insisted on seeking death, how could he be blamed? As expected, after Richard's warning, not a single believer in the hall moved, even though the pastor's mind control had ceased. Richard shook his head, there was no use in persuading those seeking death. He approached the man in black who, after being bombarded by 3 fireball techniques, was now barely recognizable as human. But it was unknown what kind of modifications this mad wizard had performed on himself, for even unconscious, his flesh continued to writhe, incessantly healing his wounds. Interesting. Richard lifted the man out, and as the flesh writhed, the man in black's appearance returned to normal. A gasp went up from the congregation upon seeing his true face. Good heavens, how can it be Mr. Nicolo? Mr. Nicolo? Richard took note of this address and immediately used the crystal to contact Spencer on the ground. Spencer, do you know someone named Nicolo? Nicolo. The voice that came from the crystal was full of surprise. Nicolo is the largest grain merchant in Gale City, sir, have you seen him inside? A grain merchant? A twinge of unease flitted through Richard's mind. Is he a graduated wizard? Richard immediately asked. How could that be, sir? Although Niccolo has a hobby of studying witchcraft, he is absolutely immortal. Spencer's answer sent a shock through Richard's heart. If Niccolo was a grain merchant, where did his spiritual power come from? Awakening spiritual power required meditation, and training spiritual power needed a long time. Gale City had some basic meditation methods, Richard could believe, but relying on basic meditation methods, one could meditate for a lifetime and still not reach the level of an advanced apprentice. No, this is a trap. A moment of realization dawned on Richard, and he immediately tried to leave the underground hall. But by then it was already a bit too late. A crimson light erupted from the altar at the center of the hall, enveloping it in an instant. Beneath this cover of crimson light, the skin of the believers began to ooze blood, which fell to the ground, forming a stream, and within the hall, drew an eerie array. The believers did not wail or show pain, they knelt in the blood light, loudly praising the blessing of the blood-red Lord. But Richard was feeling quite unwell now. He could feel his cells trembling, an eerie energy stimulating them to detach from his body. Richard had no time to think further, as several fireballs appeared in front of him, heading straight for the altar at the center of the hall. Meanwhile, he turned and ran outside. With a boom, the fireballs exploded, and the spreading flames instantly enveloped the altar, blasting several nearby believers into pieces. When the flames dissipated, the altar remained untouched. A blood barrier had stopped all their power. Before Richard's pupils could constrict, ready to attack again, he saw a person stand up from among the believers and point a finger at him. Snap, snap, snap. 3 crackling sounds rang beside Richard's ears, the sound of his mental barrier shattering. In an instant, his brain felt as if it had been stabbed by dozens of red-hot iron spikes, causing severe pain that left his mind blank. Mad wizard! Richard yelled, clutching his head. You're not dead. The mad wizard was somewhat surprised. Most advanced apprentices wouldn't survive his strike. But no matter, if he wasn't dead, just finish him with another blow. With that thought, the mad wizard's magic power surged, preparing for another strike. Bang! The mad wizard stared dumbfounded at the position of his right arm, which was now only a mist of blood. Ugh! The mad wizard grunted, his face turned pale, and blood flowed continuously from his eyes, mouth, and nose. The intense pain instantly disrupted his attention, and the spell he was forming failed. The spell backlash hit him immediately. He probably couldn't use spells for a short time now. He pulled a fine steel magic wand, half a person tall, from his magic pocket, and the flesh at the wound of his right arm twisted until a new arm grew out in moments. He turned to look at Richard and saw that Richard was holding a strange piece of magic equipment that resembled some kind of alien crossbow. Darn, missed, Richard said, enduring the headache as he put the magic gun back into his pocket. This thing could only surprise and kill. If it didn't finish the job with one shot, it was hard to achieve anything. At that moment, Richard didn't dare to use spells recklessly either. The damage from the psychic attack wasn't easy to remove, the severe pain came from the soul, and even concentration potions wouldn't make him immune. Under the blood light, the 2 wizard apprentices stared at each other from a distance. The next moment, their figures collided with each other, erupting waves of air. With the mad wizard present, Richard certainly couldn't leave easily. The sacrifice ritual seemed eerily abnormal, and if left to continue, who knew what chaos it might cause. Moreover, Richard had an inkling that this blood-red deity might not be a fabrication of the mad wizards. This so-called divine being might truly exist. If the ritual kept going, there was fear that the being might indeed descend. Richard knew that the wizard world definitely had its own countermeasures for such events, but even if that being descended for just a second, Richard would be dead. Perhaps the descent of such a being was only a minor loss to the wizard world, they might even gain a bit from it. But Richard had no desire to be the sacrificial price for that. In the bloody light, Richard transformed into the black-scaled giant, his body bristling with muscles, each movement carrying the force of 10,000 pounds. The mad wizard, although employing spells from the mind school, now had physical strength that nearly matched Richard, an apprentice who had refined his physique. Muffled booms continuously resonated inside the hall, 2 near non-human creatures, one wielding a magic wand, the other swinging a great sword, attacking each other's vital points with every move. But, in the end, the mad wizard wasn't one who specialized in physique, and Richard gradually gained the upper hand in the fight. Once the mad wizard revealed a flaw, Richard let out a ferocious smile, and his arm muscles suddenly swelled. Boom! A burst of blood broke out from the mad wizard's chest, a powerful force penetrating and blasting an almost translucent hole. It's over, Richard said coldly, ready to strike off the mad wizard's head with his sword. Indeed, it's over. The mad wizard revealed a mocking smile, and behind him, a space rift suddenly opened above the altar, revealing a blood-red eye. My lord is about to descend. Chapter 78. Indescribable fear surged through Richard again. That eye did nothing but cast a glance at him, and his entire body felt like it was about to disintegrate. World Master, it must be a World Master. Richard thought to himself in terror. That eye definitely belonged to a World Master. The deranged wizard looked at Richard mockingly. Although he too was frozen by the World Master's overwhelming presence, to him, it represented the majesty of his master. "Oh my master, descend upon this world," the deranged wizard shouted near madness. But the next moment, he noticed something was off. How was Richard moving? Under the might of the blood-red master, how could such an insect like Richard even stir? Richard slowly moved his hand to the pocket at his waist. Unlike this ignorant deranged wizard, he had legitimately met the Great Wizard. During his last encounter with the Great Wizard, Richard's body had adapted to the extreme fear. Now, Richard could move somewhat normally under the slightly lesser pressure from the World Master. The space rift was gradually expanding, as though the owner of those blood-red eyes truly intended to descend upon this world. Richard reached into his magic pocket and pulled out 3 black cylinders. Magic equipment? Foolish lamb, do you still struggle? Submit at the feet of my master. My master will bring a perfect earthly heaven to this world, the deranged wizard shouted fanatically. But Richard ignored him, only silently estimating the distance to the altar. I am 3 meters away from the altar, this distance should be enough. Richard looked at the altar and suddenly channeled magic power into his heart. The next moment, a strong force burst from his heart, giving him the power for one throw. Go! The 3 cylinders hit the altar precisely. 3, 2. It's useless, the deranged wizard laughed madly. Unless a wizard intervenes, no one can break this altar. 1. Boom! Blinding light burst forth like the dawn of chaos, enveloping the altar in an instant. The next instant, a thunderous noise echoed through the hall, leaving Richard dizzy. The bright light dissipated, and the altar was gone. The altar disappeared? How is that possible? The deranged wizard stared blankly at where the altar had stood, now only a dark crater remained. This can't be, it can't be. The deranged wizard crawled like a dog to where the altar had been, trying to find evidence that it was all an illusion. But once gone, it was gone, no matter how he searched, he couldn't bring back an almost vaporized altar. Richard quietly breathed a sigh of relief, thinking to himself that the 3 annihilation hand grenades of 1000 energy level each were indeed powerful. Without these grenades, he would have probably met his end today. But before he could catch his breath, a click sound entered his ears. No way! Richard felt disheartened and shifted his gaze towards the location of the altar. In the very space where the altar had been, countless blood-red tentacles burst through the void, forcefully tearing open a space rift. This thing had come back. Damn it! As Richard looked at the blood-red tentacles, he cursed profusely inside. He had destroyed the altar, yet this World Master was still eager to meet its demise. Is this person head hell-bent on courting death? The crazed wizard broke into a wild laughter. Ha 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 ha! I knew my master wouldn't fail like this. Hey? Why have you returned, my master? Before the crazed wizard could finish his laughter, he saw blood-red tentacles suddenly retract into the space rift, as if sensing something and preparing to flee. Ha ha ha! You think you can come to the wizard world and just leave? In an instant, the space in the underground hall seemed to freeze, the retracting tentacles were fixed in midair, and a space rift appeared out of nowhere. A wizard in a black robe stepped out. Little fellow, your task is over. Richard watched the wizard, whose presence radiated an evil and maniacal aura, resembling a destructive demon god in human skin. But he felt not an ounce of fear, and even, felt a strong kinship to him. It was as though this terrifying wizard was his own family. Is this a spell? Confusion flashed through Richard's mind. Was his mind being manipulated? The wizard in the black robe paid no attention to Richard's reaction, his arm reached out from beneath his robe toward the blood-red tentacles, grabbing at air as if holding the entire space of the underground hall in his hand. Richard felt an overwhelming pressure, and the crazed wizard seemed to endure even more, directly transforming into a puddle of flesh under this pressure. Boom! The World Master behind the rift decided to sacrifice the pawn to save the king, severing the portion of its tentacle that had extended into the wizard world. But the black-robed wizard was not done yet. He chuckled eerily and immediately reached his arm into the space rift, braving the temporal flux to catch hold of the owner of the blood-red tentacles. No alien is allowed to invade the wizard world. The two fearsome creatures battled across the chaotic flux of time and space, while Richard watched on the side, his heart pounding with fear. Soon, the black-robed wizard withdrew his arms, holding a bloody, thick tentacle in his hand. The tentacle was covered in mysterious patterns, and Richard felt dizzy and nearly fainted just from a brief glance. Flesh rule, still somewhat useful. The black-robed wizard nonchalantly opened another space rift, threw the tentacle into it, and then collected the other wriggling, convulsing tentacles from the ground as well, leaving only one the size of an arm. "Little fellow, you did well." The black-robed wizard approached Richard with the tentacle. "Evacuating civilians was a wise decision, and sticking to your duties is an admirable quality." Richard hurriedly stood up and respectfully performed the wizard's salute. "Master, I am Richard, apprentice of the 432nd class at the Black Tower Wizard Academy. I am honored to receive your praise." "You did well, this little thing is your reward." The black-robed wizard tossed the tentacle piece to Richard. "Though that world master is a level 4 creature, most of the essence in this tentacle has been reclaimed by it, and what's left is now just a shell. Whether you keep it as a specimen or study its body structure is up to you. It's not dangerous." With that, the black-robed wizard stepped forward and vanished without a trace. "Not dangerous," Richard gripped the tentacle in his hand, his miracle furnace within his soul trembling slightly. Material, unknown tentacle. Refinable rule, flesh, extremely incomplete, dissipating. Refinement cost, 5 soul power. Proceed with refinement. Flesh rule, soul power. Richard found himself in a dilemma. Soul power represented the upper limit of Richard's mental strength. Choosing to refine would cause him to plummet from an advanced wizard apprentice to an intermediate one. This would be disadvantageous for the upcoming apprentice exchange competition. But the flesh rule being refined was no ordinary thing. Creatures capable of touching such rules must at least be on the level of a 3 rings wizard. Although this rule is extremely incomplete now, for him, an apprentice, it is undoubtedly a great benefit. So, to refine, or not to refine? Chapter 79. Richard had no time for hesitation. Faced with the limits of spiritual power and the rules, Richard resolutely chose the rules. At the moment he decided to refine, Richard felt as if a piece of his soul had been sliced off by someone, an indescribable emptiness filling his heart. He felt as if something was missing. With fuel provided, the miracle furnace began to operate. The tentacle in Richard's hand vanished instantly, reappearing within the furnace. Richard wanted to observe the details of the refinement, but unfortunately, the furnace's refining process was still as rapid as ever. In an instant, a ball of light with a blood-red luster undulated above the miracle furnace. The tentacle, seemingly stripped of its last essence, while its flesh still twitched, had thoroughly degenerated into a mundane object. Flesh rule, I hope it's worth the price. After absorbing the light ball, Richard immediately felt a profound and inscrutable power enter his body, and in that moment, he seemed to achieve enlightenment. This was unlike absorbing skills, he had truly comprehended something. Once the absorption was complete, Richard opened his eyes and lightly pressed against the wall beside him. A muffled sound ensued, and Richard's palm easily left an imprint on the wall. Richard took out a crystal ball to test his current stats. Spiritual power 38, physique 45, magic power 380, rating, intermediate apprentice. Still 45 points, my physique hasn't been enhanced, Richard mused, considering his data. Under the effects of the rebound effect, physique enhancement potions, and adaptation body training, Richard's physique had reached 45 points not long ago, thereby depleting his stock of physique enhancement potions. But my strength has indeed been enhanced. And now it seems I can. With a thought, the muscles in Richard's arm began to subtly shift, strands of muscle fibers interweaving to form a new muscle structure. Flesh control? It must be more than just that. Richard took out 2 magic stones to replenish his magic power, then activated his bloodline. This time, however, activating his bloodline was different. Richard discovered he could now control the transformation of his body's bloodline, where a typical bloodline transformation would involve the whole body changing. Richard could now choose to transform only parts of his body while keeping the rest unchanged. Additionally, he could control the black scales that had emerged, fusing them together to form either a dagger or a piece of armor. An amazing rule. If I could have a bit more, could I directly control cells, or even the life core? Richard's mind burst with countless fantasies, but he quickly suppressed them. The rules were still too far out of his reach. Being fortunate enough to obtain even a sliver was a great luck. After searching the basement, Richard found a notebook and several dozen magic stones in the insane wizard's magic pocket, but as for the fine steel magic wand, Richard didn't even entertain the thought of selling it. It was too crude, selling it would be an embarrassment to him. Among the mad wizard's notes, Richard found records of an ancient spell that seemed capable of communicating with creatures from the other world. It was probably because of this spell that the apprentice had managed to find the blood-red master. Back on the surface, Richard found Spencer and told him to pour oil into the underground hall and burn it before entering again. "I'm doing this for your own good," Richard said earnestly, patting Spencer's shoulder. Because of the battle between the mysterious wizard and the world master, the entire hall had turned into a sea of blood, all sorts of flesh and organs mixed together, a sight that would give even Richard nightmares for days. After completing the task, Richard immediately took the airship back to the academy and informed Yalad of the entire situation. "World Master." Yalad sprang up from his chair upon hearing Richard's report. He circled around Richard to inspect him and found that aside from a slight weakness in magic fluctuation, his student seemed unharmed. It was incredible that one could suffer so little damage after an encounter with a world master. After the examination, Yalad suddenly gave Richard a thumbs up. "Being able to meet a world master and still live, my apprentice, you're even more formidable than your teacher." Richard smiled sheepishly and then inquired about the mysterious wizard. "This mysterious wizard you speak of must be a world guardian of the wizard world, that is, a law enforcement wizard from the judicial department. The one you encountered surely holds a high position in the judicial department." "World guardian?" Richard questioned with curiosity. "They are the world masters of the wizard world. Within the star realm, there are many ways to become a level 4 creature, or a great wizard. Among the most common is to be acknowledged by the world, to be infused with the power of world origin, and become a world guardian," Yalad explained. "World masters made in this manner receive strengthened combat abilities within their guarded worlds, but once they leave those worlds, their combat power plummets. It's a trade-off. Most of the world masters we encounter in our conquest of other worlds are of this kind." "I see, no wonder I didn't feel fear when I saw that wizard, but rather a sense of familiarity," mused Richard. Yalad sneered, "You found him amiable because you didn't violate any laws. If you had broken the law, what you'd feel upon seeing him would be fear, not friendliness." Richard just laughed, not saying anything further. But in his heart, Richard had resolved a major confusion. It seemed that as a transmigrator, he had been recognized by the wizard world. Afterward, Richard submitted his mission report. The Academy praised Richard's conduct highly and rewarded him with an additional 1,000 magic stones on top of the original task payout of 2,000 magic stones. However, Richard remained quite calm about this. 1,000 magic stones, had I earned nearly that much in 2 months. Upon returning to the Academy, Richard's life returned to normal. What was different now was that Richard suddenly began to exchange knowledge about synthetic beasts with Yalad. The flesh rule had provided Richard with the ability of flesh control, which, although currently limited to his own body, significantly increased his combat capabilities when combined with the knowledge of muscle structure from synthetic beast knowledge. Additionally, Richard felt that there was more to this ability than he was currently utilizing, and deeper secrets awaited his discovery. Besides, Richard was also researching the tentacle of the World Master. Fragments of a World Master's body weren't rare in the wizard world. Great wizards who battled in other worlds had killed countless World Masters, and even moderately wealthy wizards could purchase these unremarkable, rule-devoid fragments. But for a wizard apprentice, this tentacle was an invaluable treasure. From it, Richard obtained a kind of active flesh, which was the best material for creating and even enhancing synthetic beasts. Furthermore, this tentacle's life energy was exceptionally tenacious. After receiving nutrient solution and magic power sustenance, the severed tentacle managed to survive in the laboratory, continuously producing more active flesh. Though the output was tiny, the accumulated amount represented a considerable fortune. With this active flesh and the synthetic beast knowledge acquired from Yalad, Richard planned a transformation scheme for the Death Crow Uni. Chapter 80. Synthetic beasts were an ancient craft. In the old Dark Age, they had become a taboo technique for some wizards to create slaves. During the Enlightenment period, this ancient craft had received ample development due to wars, and masses of synthetic beasts were thrown into the wizard wars. Now, in this era of exploration, synthetic beasts had already become a necessary piece of knowledge for every academy to master. Creating a synthetic beast involved 3 steps: first, cultivating a synthetic beast core; second, preparing active flesh and various limb parts; and third, using an alchemy array to assemble these components together. Richard had once tried creating a synthetic beast, but unfortunately, he simply lacked the talent for it, and the best he could do was copy the things from the books without any original thought. But that was enough for Richard. In the laboratory, Richard, wearing a magnifying glass, was incessantly inscribing runes on a black stone platform with a feather pen. Producing synthetic beasts required an alchemy array, and enhancing synthetic beasts required one as well. After completing the inscriptions of 3,750 runes, Richard let out a slight sigh of relief. Inscribing runes was not an easy task. Constantly channeling magic power into the feather pen with the use of alchemy ink was necessary, and this process had to be maintained steady, for any fluctuation in magic power would cause the feather pen to explode violently. If unlucky, even the stone platform would be damaged, leading to its replacement. The alchemy array is complete, next is the operation. A year and a half had passed since Richard last took on a task, in which time those flesh tentacles had produced 1,500 grams of high-quality active flesh for Richard. This flesh was extremely resilient, and according to the rating of the wizard commerce, it had reached 3rd level in activity, worth 10 magic stones per gram. Richard pulled out a transparent quartz tube from his magic pocket, which contained a piece of flesh that was twisting and pulsating. "Vuni!" Richard softly called out, and a black crow flew over from one side of the laboratory. "This flesh could fetch 15,000 magic stones out there, and I've spent a small fortune to enhance you, so you better perform well." Richard muttered as he placed Vuni on the testing platform, then he took an anesthetic and injected it into its body. Once the anesthetic took effect, Richard moved the collapsed Vuni to the dissection table and donned a pair of low-light vision goggles. Yalad's mastered techniques did not include shadowless lamps, so Richard had to use these low-light vision goggles to negate the effects of shadows. With Vuni's limbs secured, Richard took out a razor to remove the feathers from its spine, and then with a scalpel, he cleanly sliced open its back skin. Observing the fresh red blood, the quivering muscles, Richard calmly watched all of this, then opened the tube holding the active flesh and directly used his hands to take it out. The active flesh had parasitic properties, they would bond with any flesh they contacted, becoming a part of the organism's body spontaneously. Therefore, under normal circumstances, wizards would not make direct contact with active flesh. But Richard was an exception. No sooner had the flesh parasitism been completed, Richard, through the ability of flesh control, took control of it. Under Richard's manipulation, this active flesh began to enter Vuni's body through the wound and attach to the muscles. This active flesh would strengthen Vuni's physique and enhance its life recovery ability. Under normal circumstances, implanting active flesh is a long and tedious process because the spread of active flesh lacks regularity, requiring the wizard himself to segment it and then place it into various muscle groups. But Richard had the sticky skill of flesh control. With just one wound, Richard could direct the active flesh to where he wanted to strengthen. After the active flesh was successfully parasitized, Richard did not rush to separate it from his body, instead, he took out a white bone fragment engraved with runes from his pocket. With one ring spell of light distortion combined with Yalad's body of black fur, once he enters the forest, he's definitely an excellent scout. Richard looked proudly at the metal, which was an idea he had while implanting the magic gun. The one ring spell of light distortion could create a faint invisibility effect, and in the shadows, there was hardly any difference from a 3 rings invisibility technique. Richard never intended to use Yalad for frontal attacks, stealth and reconnaissance were where Yalad's talents lay. He inserted the spell plugin into the wound and then used flesh control to fix it in place. The delicate flesh threads followed the fine pores on the bone fragment, firmly anchoring it onto Yalad's body. Having completed all this, Richard used a surgical scalpel to separate the active flesh from himself, then stitched up the wound and placed it onto the freshly made alchemy platform. With the infusion of magic power, the alchemy array began to promote Yalad's body to assimilate the active flesh, a lengthy and the most dangerous process. Assimilating active flesh had a certain chance of failure. At best, the active flesh could become necrotic and lose its vitality, and at worst, the active flesh could become violent, turn against its host, and engulf the body, becoming an existence similar to cancer cells. Richard locked the laboratory door and hung a "Do Not Disturb" sign on it. Yalad's matter was settled for now. Back in his bedroom, Richard casually picked up a book titled Introductory to Alchemy Mechanical Science and began studying. Alchemy machinery is one of the most widely applied branches of the alchemy school, ranging from the small magic airship that Richard rode to the massive floating cities used by the wizard world for external warfare, all masterpieces of alchemy mechanical science. But Yalad didn't have many books on alchemy mechanical science. As a wizard researching synthetic beasts, Yalad was naturally at odds with alchemy machinery. It was like the difference between genetic ascension and mechanical ascension. One school believed that the living body was flexible and reliable, the most perfect work of nature, the other believed that machinery was solid and had a strong carrying capacity, the direction of future evolution. These two viewpoints contained fundamentally irreconcilable elements. But to Yalad's frustration, aside from Chax, neither Anna nor Richard had talent in the field of synthetic beasts. In fact, Anna showed an exceptional talent for alchemy machinery. To not waste Anna's talent, he had to grudgingly tolerate Anna learning alchemy machinery. As a teacher, the professional ethics of Yalad were quite reliable. Alchemy mechanical science gave Richard a great deal of inspiration, especially when he saw a certain alchemy wizard mention in the book that the essence of the ice cone skill was physical damage and suggest a solution very similar to the magic gun. Richard even felt a sense of finding kindred spirits in a foreign land. Unfortunately, Yalad's books on alchemy machinery were too few, and Richard's time was also very tight. To make significant progress in alchemy machinery, he would have to wait until he became a wizard. Becoming a wizard, that depends on the exchange competition in half a year. Winning the competition would mean becoming a wizard 10 years ahead of time. Chapter 81. The day for the exchange match arrived in a blink of an eye. Spiritual power 41, physique 45, magic power 410, rating, advanced apprentice. In his bedroom, Richard looked at the data in the crystal ball and nodded with satisfaction. After 2 years of meditation, Richard's spiritual power had returned to the standard of an advanced wizard apprentice. This was undoubtedly a good thing for Richard's upcoming exchange match. As long as the level gap was not too wide, a slight difference in spiritual power could completely be compensated for with knowledge. Coming to the balcony, he opened the window. As usual, 3 days before the exam, an academy inspector would come to distribute the rules. Squawk! Squawk! Sure enough, just as Richard opened the window, an academy inspector flew over, clutching a scroll in its claws. Richard took the scroll back into the room, ready to see what this deputy dean had hidden for so long about the competition. Hiss! Upon unrolling the scroll, Richard gasped in surprise. Apprentice War, has the academy gone mad? According to the wizard rules set by the Truth Council, black wizards conduct bloody exams, focusing on rear attacks, while white wizards do not conduct bloody exams, focusing on straightforward legion combat. These are two completely different developmental ideologies. Yet in this scroll, the Black Tower Wizard Academy, combined with 3 other Black Wizard Academies, and 3 White Wizard Academies, had jointly organized this exam named the Apprentice War. In this exam, Black Wizard apprentices and White Wizard apprentices had to kill each other, vying for resource points on the map. Isn't this akin to conducting a bloody exam for White Wizards? Looking at the rules on the scroll, Richard sighed, casting aside the superfluous thoughts in his mind. Whether this exam conformed to the rules was not his concern. What he needed to do now was to familiarize himself with the rules quickly and then take the lead in this war. According to the rules, the battlefield was divided into 3 areas, with apprentices from both camps scattered equally across the 3 areas. In these 3 areas, each area had 7 resource points, which would transmit 1,000 magic stones every month. At the start of the war, each faction had 3 resource points per area, while the remaining resource point acted as a public resource point, belonging to whoever occupied it. Additionally, in this war, the number of magic stones an apprentice could carry was limited to 3,000. This illustrated that the resource points were designed to entice the apprentices from both sides into a bloody slaughter. Magic stones equated to combat power. Once one faction's acquisition of magic stones increased, it meant that the balance of victory would tilt towards the side with more magic stones. The victory conditions for this war were simple: if one side held fewer than 2 resource points, or if the number of apprentices dropped to less than half, that side was considered to have lost. After all regional wars ended, the overall outcome would be judged based on the victorious areas of both sides. As for the rewards and punishments for apprentices after the match, that was for the Academy to decide. The Black Tower Wizard Academy, for victories, offered 10 guaranteed wizard positions, along with magic stones exchanged based on the number of apprentices killed. If the match was lost, all these rewards would be nullified, and the academy would additionally conduct a bloody exam. It could be said that both the rewards and punishments were quite extreme. However, after all, the Black Tower Wizard Academy was a Black Wizard Academy, and it was quite normal for rewards and punishments to be a bit extreme. After reading the rules, Richard massaged his temples as he began to contemplate his strategy. War was different from the bloody exams that involved killing each other. It emphasized strategy, organization, and execution. If the White Wizard apprentices were trained as an army corps, then they would have a decisive advantage in this war. Since the White Wizard Academy did not have bloody exams, the number of their apprentices was astonishingly high, almost 3.5 times more than the Black Wizard Academy. In a regular war, this number disparity would basically declare the end of the battle. Yet the Academy's rules did not favor the Black Wizard apprentices, which made Richard very curious about what the White Wizard Academy was really like. With such a disparity in numbers exceeding 3 times, yet still allowing the rules not to favor Black Wizards. Could all these White Wizards be incompetent? Richard looked at the scroll again, ensuring he had not misread the data. The number of White Wizard apprentices was indeed more than 3 times theirs. I hope these White Wizards are really as weak as I imagine. Once he rolled up the scroll, Richard began preparing for the apprentice war. Due to the regulated amount of magic stones by the Academy, Richard had to exchange as many excess magic stones for alchemy materials as possible, specifically choosing a lot of materials for annihilation hand grenades. Recently having new ideas about alchemy machines, this was an opportunity to practice on these White Wizards. 3 days flashed by, and it was the day of the competition. Apprentices neatly lined up in formations on the plaza directly in front of the central Black Tower, each having a badge pinned to their chests by a mechanical puppet. The badge, a miniature version of the central Black Tower, had the apprentice's name and level engraved on the back. This badge not only served as a dog tag for the apprentices but also as a medal of merit for opposing apprentices. Since this event involved multiple academies, the usual cursed points system no longer applied. To count how many apprentices one had killed, one had to collect academy badges from enemy apprentices. Throwing away your badge to save your life was useless, as these badges would be tallied at the end of the test, and any apprentice without a badge would be executed by the academy. As usual, Deputy Dean Alex gave a brief speech. Apprentices of the 432nd class of the Black Tower Wizard Academy, today you will undergo an unprecedented test. This is a great trial, requested by 6 great wizards to the Truth Council, and after hundreds of years of long waiting, the Great Truth Wizard agreed to this experiment. This means that every move you make is being watched by the Great Truth Wizard. The Truth Wizard is watching us. Deputy Dean Alex was unusually passionate this time, his speech fervent, waving his arms continuously. His emotions quickly spread to the apprentices on the ground. Although the apprentices did not know what this competition implied, under Alex's speech, they became pioneers in the wizard world, great explorers, and their names would even be inscribed on the eternal monument to be worshipped by future generations. However, Richard was not swayed by this passion. Fanaticism was a double-edged sword for wizards. Though it could make wizards more passionate about doing something, it could affect their rationality, preventing them from making the best judgments. Alex's speech soon ended, and afterwards, he waved his magic wand, and alongside him, dozens of wizards around the apprentice formation waved their wands as well, together completing this massive spell. The location of this apprentice war was not in the wizard world, but within the secret realm of a great wizard. Comment. Chapter 82. Ori Makinotos was an outstanding apprentice at the Secret Keeper Wizard College, who with his exquisite shaping wizard abilities, easily defeated many rivals over the past decade's exams, earning the final reward as well as the nickname Conqueror. But Ori remained very calm. As an apprentice from a wizard family, the idea of wizard apprentices dueling on the platform couldn't stir the slightest interest in him. He longed for bloody battles, where only through such combat could his true strength be displayed. Recently, the Academy had finally announced the content of the exchange tournament, and the rules of the apprentice war immediately piqued his interest. In this war, there were no guardian wizards, all apprentices engaged in real, bloody combat. This rule made Ori's blood boil. This was the fight he had been waiting for. Upon entering the battlefield, the first thing that hit him was the scent of earth. Ori looked around. He was standing in a forest, and not far from him was a giant crystal stone floating in mid-air. This, he assumed, must be one of the resource points mentioned in the Academy's rules. The concentration of magic power is so high, at least twice that of the wizard world. A voice came from behind Ori, and turning, he saw a man with black hair watching him. "Balto, I didn't expect to find you here. Ori's eyebrows raised. This black-haired man was his old rival at the academy, Balto the mechanic from the alchemy school. Don't be so unfriendly, we're all teammates in this war, Balto said with a cunning smile, like a black fox. It better be so, Ori responded coldly, then shouted to the surrounding apprentices, I am Ori Makinotos from the Secret Keeper Wizard College. Apprentices, gather around me. As the winner of the decade's exam, Ori held a high reputation among the wizard apprentices. In times of war, it was only natural for the weak to seek the protection of the powerful. 1,500 apprentices, Ori counted the number present and found that almost all the apprentices at this resource point were from the Secret Keeper Academy. 1,500 apprentices at a resource point, 4,500 at 3 points, that's roughly the same number of people from our college participating in the war. It seems that the other two areas should be the same, each with about 4,500 people. That's a staggering number of apprentices, Ori, said Balto, joining him. With this number of apprentices, the amount of magic stones we'll get each month, on average, will be less than 1 per person. Then we'll go plunder the Black Wizard apprentices' resource points, Ori replied without hesitation. Oh, it seems our conqueror already has a plan, Balto laughed. Ori gave him a cold glance. Take advantage of the fact that the war has just started, and everyone has a lot of magic stones, and take as many of the Black Wizard apprentices' resource points as possible. Kill them outright if possible, and if not, weaken them as much as we can. Balto nodded thoughtfully, that's a good idea, indeed. With your influence, the apprentices from our college will surely follow you. If we can gain the upper hand early on, the rest of the war will be much easier to fight. What about you? Ori asked, staring at Balto. Mechanic Balto, will you follow me? Balto hesitated a bit. I'll pass, offensive attacking is not my strong suit. I'll cheer you on from the back. Leave me 300 people, and I'll repair some things on the side. You think I will fail? Ori asked sharply, his tone a bit harsh. Balto smiled, a hint of cunning in his eyes. One must always be prepared for the unexpected. On the other side of the battlefield, the Black Wizard apprentices began their own plan. Richard, as the legendary apprentice from the Black Tower Wizard Academy, naturally became the leader of the Black Tower Wizard Academy apprentices after displaying just a sliver of his own strength. Unfortunately, within this group of apprentices, Richard didn't find ally. Random assignment really is a headache. Richard rubbed his head and then set his gaze on a bald apprentice not far away. The bald apprentice was clad in a red robe, holding a staff as tall as a man. The head of the staff emitted an extraordinary magic fluctuation, revealing that it was no mere trinket. Ori, what are you planning to do? Ori was a formal apprentice of Master Alan from the Black Tower Wizard Academy, majoring in shape-shifting school. In the last bloody examination, he was also one of the 20 who entered the secret realm. I don't really have any ideas. Ori touched his bald head, pretending to be very shy. In his opinion, it was a foolish thing to seize the apprentices' leadership at the start. The White Wizard apprentices outnumbered the Black Wizard apprentices by almost 3.5 times when it came to manpower. At the beginning, when everyone's magic stones were the most abundant, even fools knew that the White Wizard apprentices would rush over to give the Black Wizard apprentices a hard strike. At this time, taking command not only meant bearing the greatest pressure but also carried a high risk of failure. Ori considered himself smart, only a fool would compete with Richard for leadership at this moment. Seeing Ori had no intention to lead, Richard scoffed inwardly, understanding the other's plan. Leadership at this stage was indeed a hot potato. But though the risk was high at this time, the potential rewards were equally immense. Since you don't have any ideas, I'll just thicken my skin and take the role of leader, Richard smiled at his fellow apprentices, self-appointing himself as the commander. As long as the leader demonstrated their strength during this initial period and achieved a certain degree of success, their leadership position in this war would be very stable. War was no child's play. In a situation involving life and death, everyone preferred to trust a leader who had shown capability. Richard's self-appointment was met without opposition, his strength was sufficient, a senior apprentice towering at the apex of the pyramid among these apprentices. Since no one objects, then I'm going to establish some rules. Using the levitation skill, Richard flew into the air to make himself as visible as possible to all apprentices. This is war, and on the battlefield, orders must be followed without question. I won't send anyone on suicidal missions, but since this is war, danger is inevitable. I expect my orders to be carried out, not to be refused. I hate being refused." Saying this, Richard exuded the pressure of a senior wizard apprentice. "There's nothing in the Academy's rules that forbids us from infighting. If anyone doesn't follow the rules, humph." Richard snorted coldly, the implication clear. After waiting a while and seeing no one among the apprentices come forward to object, Richard returned to the ground. To tell the truth, Richard actually hoped someone would cause trouble, giving him a chance to assert his authority. But unfortunately, the apprentices of the Black Tower Wizard Academy were all clever, no one wanted to slap Richard in the face at this moment. After coming down, Richard didn't issue any orders but chose to send Vuni flying, ready to reconnoiter the White Wizard apprentices' movements. With the help of Vuni's vision, Richard easily saw a group of White Wizard apprentices hurrying their way. To make a move right after arriving, that's really not giving any face. Richard sighed and issued his first order. "Prepare for defense. The White Wizard apprentices are coming." Chapter 83. According to the map issued by the Academy, the battlegrounds in the three areas were almost identical, all shaped like hourglasses. Each side had 3 resource points arranged in a triangle, with one public resource point in the middle between the two camps. And from Vuni's point of view, apprentice White Wizards were heading straight their way. This indicated that Richard was now at the resource point closest to the center of the battlefield on the Black Wizard apprentices' side. And seeing the group of apprentice White Wizards coming aggressively, Richard guessed that these people hadn't even built their resource point and were heading straight toward them. All shaping wizards clean up a clearing at this location as soon as possible, undead wizards prepare to summon the undead, soul wizards prepare for the first wave of mental attacks, alchemy wizards prepare to construct the fortress, Richard ordered methodically, and upon receiving their orders, the apprentices started to move. It was said that a new official fires thrice upon his appointment, and at this moment, Richard, as a newly appointed leader, was in dire need of establishing his authority, and it might prove fatal to oppose him at this time. Richard didn't know much about wars among wizards. His decisions now were all derived from military chess inference he had made over the past 2 days. Now that he was actually on the battlefield, Richard could only pray that his inference was correct. With the help of spells, shaping wizards quickly cleared a clearing in the forest, and the large trees that were cut down were used by alchemy wizards to construct the fortress. The basic skill of an alchemy wizard is engraving runes, commonly known as enchantments. These wood materials would attain significantly improved physical properties once engraved with runes. Moreover, alchemy wizards also had a skill in magic array, which was particularly useful in constructing fortresses. As a leader, Richard, besides allocating apprentices, put his remaining focus on Vuni in the sky. Since these apprentice White Wizards had no experience, it never occurred to them that a magic pet was observing them from above. According to the map, the Black Wizard apprentice's resource point is just ahead. Ori, looking at the map in his hands, spoke with an air of victory. Just moments ago, he had led an army of apprentice White Wizards to occupy the central public resource point on the battlefield. After occupying it, he chose not to build defenses at the resource point, but rather led the apprentice White Wizards mightily towards the Black Wizard apprentice's resource point. Resource points would start distributing magic stones in a month, so leaving wizards to guard them now seemed pointless, better to press forward with all forces, quickly compressing the living space of Black Wizard apprentices. Ori's plan was sound. First, quickly capture a Black Wizard apprentice's resource point with a blitzkrieg, compressing their living space. Then wait for the rear forces of apprentice White Wizards to reinforce and snatch another resource point with a numerical advantage to swiftly end the war. If progress went smoothly, they might be able to end the war in their area in less than a month. But when does anything go without obstacles? "Lord Ori, we have discovered a clearing ahead, it seems to have been cleared by Black Wizard apprentices," reported an apprentice White Wizard. "A clearing?" Ori was taken aback, then burst into laughter. "These Black Wizard apprentices are idiots. I was worrying about the complexity of the forest making it difficult to leverage our apprentice White Wizard's core combat. They've conveniently cleared it for us." Ori's laughter was met with a roar of laughter from those around. As apprentice White Wizards, what they studied most was core combat, among which formation advancement was particularly important. Yet, some apprentice White Wizards expressed concern. "Lord Ori, could this be a trap?" questioned an apprentice White Wizard worriedly. "A trap?" Ori said disdainfully. "What kind of trap could stop the march of a White Wizard apprentice corps? In the face of absolute power, traps are but the ploys of the weak." Having said that, Owen flew up into the air and shouted to all apprentice White Wizards. "Prepare for formation. Let these Black Wizard apprentices behold our spirit." Meanwhile, Richard, hidden in a bunker in the distance, quietly watched the apprentice white wizards advance gradually. Are these apprentice white wizards fools? Richard murmured to himself. He suddenly realized why the academy disregarded the significant numerical discrepancies. These apprentice white wizards had never experienced real fighting and had no experience in actual combat. Even apprentices participating in the entrance exam at the Black Tower Wizard Academy should know to keep themselves hidden during an attack and not make unnecessary noise. Moreover, looking at their giggling demeanor, there was not the slightest hint of seriousness one would expect for the battlefield. Richard could not help but sigh. The academy really had its reasons for setting the rules. Soul wizards prepare for the first wave of interference, shaping wizards get ready to harvest the battlefield. Richard instructed through the crystal ball. Having learned that the exchange match was a battle among apprentices, Richard had specifically purchased many sound transmission crystal balls for communication. As a transmigrator, he fully understood the significance of communication on the battlefield. The white wizard apprentices quickly moved into casting range, arranging themselves in a square formation, marching with uniform steps reminiscent of the musketeers from the era of line infantry. A bunch of fools, soul wizards begin the interference, shaping wizards cast your spells. Richard let out a sneer and issued the command. Wizards hidden near the battlefield immediately cast their long-prepared spells. In an instant, the vanguard of the white wizard apprentice army faltered. Dozens of white wizard apprentices held their heads in agonizing pain, their faces changing instantly. At the same time, hundreds of elemental magic spells also bombarded the forefront of the white wizard apprentice army. Boom, boom, boom. Engage the enemy! Engage the enemy! The white wizard apprentices shouted loudly as magic barriers appeared around them. However, many of them were outside the casting range of the black wizard apprentices, and their use of magic barriers was a complete waste of magic power. What a bunch of idiots! Richard said disdainfully, then ordered the shaping wizards to cast their spells again. Another round of spell bombardment ensued. Bright red flames, charred bodies. Faced with such a brutal sight for the first time, the morale of the white wizard apprentices instantly collapsed, and they ran frantically to the rear, seemingly disregarding their impact on the formation of their comrades. Stop, stop, don't run! Ori, seated at the center, loudly berated the fleeing wizards, but not a single one was willing to listen to him. The cruelty of war far exceeded the expectations of these ivory tower white wizard apprentices. Boom! The third onslaught of spells began. This time, the effect was not as good as the previous ones, as most of the white wizard apprentices had activated their magic barriers, blocking most of the spells. But at this moment, their morale had collapsed, and their original team advantage had turned into a disadvantage. Richard watched as the disorganized white wizard apprentices listlessly issued another command. Full assault, kill as many as you can. Saying this, the impatient black wizard apprentices immediately poured out, effortlessly joining the melee after losing their formation advantage. Various spells exploded non-stop in the woods, the pitiful screams of white wizard apprentices and the fierce laughter of black wizard apprentices echoed continuously through the forest. Richard did not engage directly, but instead found a flat area and drew a magic array with chalk. As Richard infused magic power, a fire element gradually gathered in the center of the magic array. The fire element grew increasingly intense, finally transforming into a 3-meter-tall flame giant. Human, you have finally summoned me. Richard pointed towards the battlefield. Go and slaughter these people, bring me the badges from their bodies. Chapter 84. The battle lasted nearly an hour and ended with a resounding defeat for the white wizard apprentices. Richard obtained 8 insignias during this encounter. The concentration of elements on the battlefield had risen sharply due to various elemental spells, which allowed the flame giant to be in its element, its every move unleashing immense power. While cleaning up the battlefield, Richard took inventory of their numbers and discovered that only about a dozen black wizard apprentices had died, while the white wizard apprentices had left nearly 300 bodies behind. This casualty ratio left Richard secretly clicking his tongue in wonder. All were wizard apprentices, so why were these white wizard apprentices so inept? What happened to the well-trained legions the white wizard had promised? This wasn't Richard's fault for misjudging. He had never experienced a plane war and did not know what the wizard world's plane wars were truly like. Therefore, he could only judge the condition of the white wizard apprentices based on his past life's impressions of soldiers. In reality, these two were not the same, they couldn't even be compared, they were worlds apart. Many conflicts arose during the cleanup process. For 1 or 2 insignias, black wizard apprentices fought fiercely, forcing Richard to personally intervene to stop them. Sigh, what a headache. Richard, watching the Black Wizard apprentices fight over battlefield cleanup, felt overwhelmed by the trouble. If it weren't for preventing infighting, Richard would not bother with such matters. This is the downside of Black Wizard apprentices, the law of the jungle forces them to seize every opportunity for gain. Richard sighed and then gave the order that in the case of disputed insignias, they would toss a coin to decide. If this happened again, he would personally take action to kill both parties involved. There were rules among Black Wizard apprentices, the most convincing of which was the rule of brute force. After cleaning up the battlefield, many Black Wizard apprentices were eager and gearing up, ready for another fight. The reason was simple, the battle had been too easy, and they now considered the White Wizard apprentices walking pieces of fat meat. Looking at his group of Black Wizard apprentices, Richard also ordered a full military strike, aiming directly for the common resource point. Although Richard was considering defense and counterattack, this was an excellent opportunity to kick an enemy when they were down, especially since the White Wizard apprentices' morale had been shattered. Considering their current condition, it was likely that the common resource point was practically undefended and wouldn't take much effort to capture. At the common resource point, "Trash, all trash!" Ori roared within the newly erected tent. 1,200 apprentices fighting against a little over 300, and not a step gained, losing 300 men to boot. Isn't this laughable if you think about it? Inside the tent, several advanced wizard apprentices from Secret Keeper Academy had somber expressions, their confidence had been utterly shattered by the recent battle. "What do we do now?" one advanced apprentice asked. They had suffered heavy casualties and low morale. If the Black Wizard apprentices attacked now, they would surely crumble once again. "What do we do?" Ori glared at the apprentice who had asked the question. "We regroup, plan our tactics, and take back the dignity we've lost." "Do I really need to say this? Or do you want us to slink back, then tell the apprentices from other academies that we were defeated by Black Wizard apprentices, that we lost over 300 men, while possibly only a few of them died?" But even though Ori said this aloud, he felt deeply pessimistic about the upcoming battle in his heart. This battle had given him some insight into the issues with the White Wizard apprentices. White Wizard apprentices were numerous, but due to a lack of combat experience, they easily became disorganized when faced with sudden attacks. Moreover, the lack of experience in killing led to many White Wizard apprentices feeling extreme fear at the sight of corpses, causing them to act irrationally. Besides this, he also discovered that he, as a leader, had no deterrent power within the team. When the tide of the battlefield turned against them, nobody would follow his commands. And these were merely the problems he had just discovered. If the battle continued, he was sure to uncover more. A few advanced apprentices quietly emerged from the tent and began to organize the team to set up defensive measures. Compared to Richard, who had never experienced wizard combat, the White Wizard apprentices' curriculum included how to construct fortresses and defensive measures on the battlefield, so they were adept at setting up these defenses. The defensive measures of the White Wizard apprentices were common thick walls, trenches filled with spikes, and apprentices from the alchemy school would plant dangerous magical plants outside the trenches. Furthermore, while constructing these measures, alchemy wizards would also inscribe magic arrays to create traps or fortify the walls. For a group of people scared out of their wits, nothing was more reassuring than a solid wall. Unfortunately, just as their construction had begun, the forms of Black Wizard apprentices appeared from the depths of the dense forest. The undead wizards should release the puppets, Richard issued the order. As an apprentice of the alchemy school, Richard naturally knew the methods of his peers. The undead wizards summoned skeletons and pushed forward, quickly triggering some magic arrays. Watching the sudden appearance of fireballs and ice cones, the Black Wizard apprentices hidden in the woods looked at Richard admiringly. Without Richard's wisdom, many of them might have mindlessly rushed forward. The White Wizard apprentices at the resource point immediately noticed the trace of the Black Wizard apprentices, but due to the earlier battle, this group of White Wizard apprentices had no desire to fight and ran backwards upon seeing the Black Wizard apprentices. This meant that some of the defensive measures that could have been used were now rendered useless. Ori, at the center of the resource point, was furious but ultimately bit back his anger. "Ox! Bazak! Organize the apprentices for an orderly retreat. Don't run like it's a damn disaster." The two disoriented wizard apprentices heard Ori's command and suddenly had a sense of direction. They immediately began organizing the retreat. The Black Wizard apprentices entered the resource point boldly, casting their spells generously. The White Wizard apprentices scattered like lambs to the slaughter, but this time, Due to experience and having someone to coordinate, the loss for the White Wizard apprentices was significantly less. After clearing the battlefield, over 100 corpses were left behind by the White Wizard apprentices in the struggle for the resource point. It seems the White Wizard apprentices are gaining experience, Richard murmured, looking at the statistics. At this rate, it wouldn't take many more battles before the White Wizard apprentices grew stronger, and that's when the real war would begin. Regroup the team, no further pursuit, Richard ordered the Black Wizard apprentices around him. Hey? Boss Richard, aren't we continuing to chase them down? One Black Wizard apprentice asked, surprised. You're questioning my order. Richard looked at him coldly. As the White Wizard apprentices fled, they continued to organize into teams, but because the Black Wizard apprentices lacked proper training, they were disorganized in their pursuit. If the chase continued, once the White Wizard apprentices recovered their strength, the Black Wizard apprentices would be the ones dying. Yes, boss. The Black Wizard apprentice nervously performed a wizard's salute to Richard and then began to relay Richard's commands. The boss has given the order, stop the pursuit. Stop the pursuit. Chapter 85. Richard's commands were swiftly passed down, but unlike the unchallenged orders of the past, this time his commands elicited many questions from the Black Wizard apprentices. Boss, these White Wizard apprentices are like fat sheep ripe for slaughter, not pursuing them is a waste. Richard quietly observed the apprentices who raised objections, his icy gaze chilling them to the bone. Richard, why aren't we pursuing them? Eugene stepped forward from among the apprentices, while those opposing Richard's orders gathered around him. Why? Richard scoffed with a cold laugh, am I the leader, or are you? Do I need to explain the reasons for my decisions to you? Obedience is of utmost importance in an army. If he had to explain the reasons for every command, then what's the point of waging a war? Eugene's expression shifted at Richard's words, his face instantly contorting with anger. Richard, you really think you're a wizard already? We're all apprentices here. You were made leader because we respected your strength, it was an honor we granted you. If we don't wish it, you're nothing. These words instantly garnered agreement from many apprentices. That's right, if we don't agree, you're nothing. The self-proclaimed leader really thinks highly of himself. These White Wizard apprentices are so weak, we don't need a leader to win. Richard laughed coldly at these various comments, secretly making note of those who echoed them. These people had issues with Richard from the start, but out of fear of Richard's power, they dared not express it. Now with Eugene, the tall one, taking the lead, their true colors were showing. Eugene, standing at the forefront, listened to these voices with a sense of secretive triumph. During the first battle with the White Wizard apprentices, he had begun to regret so easily handing over the leadership. These White Wizard apprentices were too foolish. Unfortunately, once words are spoken and water is spilled, it cannot be taken back. The leadership had already fallen into Richard's hands, and unless Richard made a mistake, he wouldn't be able to regain leadership. But he hadn't expected Richard's mistake to come so quickly. If only he seized this opportunity, he could definitely shake Richard's leadership status, even take it for himself. Very well, so I'm nothing. Richard laughed derisively as he pulled out his Demon Eater sword from the magic pocket. It seems, Eugene, you want to be the voice of the people. I dare not claim to be the leader, but this is indeed what everybody is thinking, Eugene spoke with righteous indignation. But being the voice of opinion is not so easy. The Demon Eater sword ignited with dark flames, and the explosive magic fluctuation instantly scattered the surrounding apprentices. Eugene, likewise, would not show weakness, his magic wand emitted a surge of magic. The rule among the Black Wizards, might makes right. Right now, the apprentices' dissatisfaction with Richard had not accumulated to the point of overthrowing him. To topple Richard's leadership at this moment, Eugene would need a mightier fist. With a wave of his hand, Richard summoned a flame giant to his side, the energy fluctuating around it indicating the presence of an advanced wizard apprentice. But Eugene was not to be outdone, he promptly pulled a cage from his magic pocket. Inside the cage was a pulsing ball of flames. Eugene smiled slightly, then opened the cage, releasing a flame monster bird close to the strength of an advanced apprentice. Elemental creatures, I have them too. The strength of this flame monster bird might not be at the level of an advanced apprentice, but it was definitely capable of holding off the flame giant. As long as Eugene could quickly deal with Richard, then the flame giant would naturally fall into his control. Richard stopped talking, black scales beginning to appear on his body. The two top apprentices from the Black Wizard camp began their battle for power. shifting the perspective to the side of the White Wizard apprentices. The infighting within the Black Wizard apprentices was intense, and naturally, the ranks of the defeated White Wizard apprentices were anything but calm. Upon returning to the resource point after their defeat, Ori was immediately questioned, notably by Balto, who had not participated in the previous battle. At the center of the White Wizard resource point, within a newly erected building, Balto and the advanced apprentices among the White Wizard apprentices gathered. "Ori, it seems your strategy has failed," Balto said with a smirk, dragging his chin as he looked at Ori. Ori was silent, leaning back and quietly scanning the room full of apprentices. "I indeed lost. So, what about it?" Ori said coldly, "Does anyone among you wish to take my place and fight those Black Wizard apprentices who are surging with momentum and have walked through blood?" As he spoke, he turned his gaze to Balto, seated in the seat of honor. "Balto, do you want to take over? To lead these disciples, who have lost their courage and fighting spirit, against that group of Black Wizard apprentices in their prime?" "Listen to you," Balto chuckled, "I have no intentions of staging a coup." But his tone shifted as he continued. "However, according to the rules taught to us by the Academy, I now request the formation of a military council. All advanced apprentices will join the council to partake in military decisions." "A military council?" Ori suddenly laughed, a mocking laugh. "Balto, you're always like this. Lacking the will to take responsibility, forever slippery and non-stick." Unconcerned by Ori's scorn, Balto rapped his knuckles on the table and said to everyone in the room, "What do you all think of my proposal?" The other apprentices showed various expressions, some looked troubled, some grim, some deep in thought, and some decisively made their choice. "I agree with the mechanic's proposal to establish a military council." "I also agree." "I agree, we can't afford more losses now." "I disagree, war is no child's play, we don't have time for discussion, decisions must be made quickly." Soon, all apprentices had cast their votes, and they finally turned their gaze to Ori. As the leader, and the strongest among the apprentices, whether Ori could peacefully transfer power was crucial for the future of the war. In a wizard's war, the team is important, but individual strength still plays a significant role. Sometimes, the actions of a powerful individual at a critical moment could potentially turn the tide of the entire battle. Ori stood up, swept his eyes across the assembled crowd, then turned and walked out of the room. He knew that to continue arguing was pointless and would only add to the ridicule. "I agree to the establishment of the military council." With a victorious smile, Balto stood up and announced to the other apprentices. "Very well, effective today, the Secret Keeper Academy's military council is officially established." Flames flew, explosions erupted. In the dense forest, the flame giant and the flame monster bird were engaged in combat. The flame giant raised a massive hand, and a fire element gathered in its palm, forming a fiery javelin. "Foolish fire beast, taste the javelin of the mighty Philster." The flame monster bird shrieked as a burst of flames exploded from its body, increasing its speed instantly. The flame giant's javelin grazed its body, tracing a brilliant arc in the sky. This struggle had been ongoing for some time, with the monster bird's high maneuverability enabling it to repeatedly dodge the flame giant's lethal attacks. If nothing unexpected occurred, this battle would continue indefinitely. However, on another part of the battlefield, the fight between Richard and Eugene was nearing its end. Chapter 86. "Monster, he's truly a monster," Eugene said, staring at the black giant before him, with a cry of panic in his heart. He took out a magic stone to replenish his magic power and then swung his magic wand. A fire crow crashed into Richard, bursting into fierce flames. But after the flames had vanished, the black giant continued toward him at an unhurried pace, and the wound he had caused was healing at a visibly rapid rate. Before this, the black giant had taken at least a dozen spells from him, with both fire and ice, each over 50 in energy level. But when they hit the giant before him, they could only leave a few wounds at most, and at worst, a blood hole. "What kind of monster am I fighting against?" On the other side, Richard walked toward him with a great sword in hand, unhurried. At the start of the fight, Richard had wanted to finish it quickly. But after trading blows with Eugene, Richard suddenly lost that desire. He did not understand what Master Alan, Eugene's teacher, had been researching, but from his exchange with Eugene, it was clear that Master Alan had profound research into the application of magic power. Eugene had already released over 30 spells, but only now did he start to use a magic stone to replenish his magic power. This showed that his spells consumed very little magic power. However, the power of Eugene's spells was not slight, many were close to 100 in energy level. Combined with his energy consumption, Eugene could practically be called a spell machine gun, very few wizards could withstand such an assault. Unfortunately for Eugene, Richard was one of those few. Thanks to the training from the adaptation body, Richard had extreme resistance to elemental magic, coupled with the recovery brought by his bloodline activation, as well as the flesh control derived from the flesh rule. Richard could easily catch Eugene's assaults with magic power. By seizing this opportunity, Richard wanted to show off his martial prowess to the surrounding black wizards, to give them a clear sense of his strength. He did this to prevent similar internal conflicts from arising in the future. For the vast majority of apprentices, the most important aspect of this apprentice war wasn't the gains, but rather, survival. Those who could become a wizard's apprentice were after all a minority. Most apprentices would immediately choose to graduate after reaching the level of advanced apprentice, becoming the academy's excellent workers. By intimidating these people, Richard's leadership would be much smoother later on. Boom! Another fireball struck Richard. Richard did not react, but a commotion suddenly arose among the surrounding apprentices. "Boss, there are wizards from other academies coming over." Richard frowned, thinking it was time to end this performance. Upon hearing that apprentices from other academies were approaching, Eugene's heart instantly tightened. He instantly realized that his opponent was about to get serious. "It's over." Richard smiled, suddenly his right arm swelled rapidly, transforming into a black pillar in an instant. Under the effect of flesh control, Richard could mobilize muscles from other parts of his body into his right arm, achieving a tremendous increase in strength. "It's you who's finished!" Eugene roared, his red robe bursting open, revealing his upper body covered in runes. This was his do-or-die tactic. He never expected Richard to push him so far. Magic power flowed into the runes, and Eugene's body started to shrink instantly, but his eyes grew increasingly bright. A terrifying fireball condensed in front of him, reaching at least 200 in energy level. Boom! The fireball exploded, and the scattered fire element caused a wave of fire that instantly turned grass and vegetation into ashes under its wave, while the earth and stones were scorched, cracked, and charred black. Eugene stiffly stared at Richard with his withered body. He didn't believe Richard could withstand it this time. But after the flames, a black giant still stood there. How is this possible? Eugene's face was filled with disbelief. The next instant, a black greatsword shattered his head. Got a bit cocky. Richard shook the char off his body, and the flesh on his back suddenly split open, dropping out several drained magic stones. This was one of the uses for flesh control that Richard had developed over the past days. By manipulating his flesh, he had stored hundreds of magic stones within his body as a backup energy reserve. Once his magic power was exhausted, he could quickly replenish it. Just now, Richard had barely maintained the magic barrier against that terrible spell by instantly draining over 20 magic stones. Clap, clap, clap. Applause came from behind Richard, and as he turned to look, a man with short hair, dressed in a black robe and holding a long sword, was watching him. The short-haired man had blonde hair, wore glasses, and appeared very robust. Behind him stood a group of black wizard apprentices with academy emblems. "Exquisite technique. Your control over flesh is truly extraordinary," commended the short-haired man. Richard took out a wizard robe from his pocket and put it on. "Void Academy? Or Annihilation Academy?" The Void Wizard Academy and the Annihilation Wizard Academy were the other two academies participating in the exchange competition from the Black Wizard camp. Each had approximately 1,100 participants, about the same number as the Black Tower Wizard Academy. "Void Wizard Academy, Anderson," the short-haired man replied with a wizard's salute. "Black Tower Wizard Academy, Richard," Richard returned the gesture. At that moment, there was a stir among the apprentices behind Anderson, and a wizard apprentice came up to him, whispering a couple of sentences. "Oh, friends from Annihilation Academy have arrived as well." Anderson smiled, and the apprentices behind him cleared a path. A skeleton wizard with soul fire blazing in his eye sockets, cloaked in a black robe, walked in, followed by a group of apprentices with the emblem of Annihilation Academy. "Annihilation Academy, Aldo?" Richard raised an eyebrow, as, within a short time, people from all three academies had arrived. "Now that all three are here, let's take a seat. The campsite the White Wizards left us is quite comfortable to use." With that, Richard pointed towards the tents in the distance. The leaders of the three Acadices entered together, none with retainers in tow. Unlike the white wizards, all black wizards operated under a dictatorship. The tent still had chairs left by Ori and his companions. The three sat down and glanced at each other. The confrontation between your Black Tower Wizard Academy and the White Wizards seems to have been quite fruitful. Anderson initiated the conversation. He had passed the first resource point with the apprentices from Void Academy, and the various White Wizard corpses left on the ground made Anderson shudder. What made the apprentices of this Black Tower Wizard Academy so powerful to have killed so many White Wizards? Not bad, killed about 400, Richard replied nonchalantly. Aldo and Anderson exchanged glances, seeing the shock in each other's eyes. Over 400 apprentices. What were your casualties? Aldo couldn't help asking. Well, Richard smiled, quite a few were injured, and about a dozen died. Chapter 87. SSS. Anderson and Aldo instantly inhaled a breath of cold air. An exchange ratio approaching 1 to 40, were all the apprentices from the Black Tower Wizard Academy monsters? 1 to 40. Anderson and Aldo both exclaimed in shock, the number was so outrageous that their brains struggled to process it. Not right. Aldo was the first to recover, the strength of the White Wizards must be problematic. Richard smiled serenely, without much explanation. How could the White Wizards be so weak? Anderson also came around, his tone carrying uncertainty. The White Wizard Academy focuses on Legion training, while the Black Wizard Academy emphasizes individual strength. Logically, White Wizards should have an advantage, so how could they be so weak? Richard shook his head. Anderson's ideas were exactly like his had been at first. Who could have thought that White Wizards would be so lackluster? Although White Wizards do focus on Legion training, their approach is too gentle, and they lack proper combat experience, Richard explained. Simply put, these people are rich in theory but lacking in combat experience. Once they encounter unexpected situations, they lose their footing. When we faced them, we merely blunted their edge a little, and they fled in defeat. That bad? Aldo could hardly believe it. If the White Wizards were really as incompetent as Richard described, then how had they become the mainstream who conquered other worlds in the wizard world? Believe it or not, Richard shrugged indifferently, sharing this information purely because they were all in the same camp, as allies with a common goal. I'm telling the plain truth. The exchange ratio is laid out right before you, the numbers from all three academies are roughly the same, you can go out and count for yourself. After a moment of silence, Anderson and Aldo eventually thanked Richard. It was undoubtedly a good thing that Richard was willing to share intelligence. What do you two plan to do next? Press the advance? Richard asked with curiosity. Is the Black Tower Wizard Academy not planning to strike? Anderson frowned, wondering if Richard's words were a ruse. If the White Wizards were truly as useless as he said, there was no reason for them not to pursue. Our Black Tower Wizard Academy is not planning to pursue, Richard nodded. At present, we have some internal issues. I just dealt with a troublemaker, and now we need to regroup. Anderson remembered the scene he'd witnessed upon his arrival. So, there was a power struggle, he thought to himself. He'd initially thought that Richard was in a duel with a powerful White Wizard. Apart from that, I would like to advise you too, Richard said calmly, the number of White Wizards we faced doesn't add up, a portion of them did not come to the battle, which suggests they might be preparing defenses at the resource point. If you want to pursue, it's best to strike as soon as possible. If you delay, once their defenses are established, the losses will be greater if you move against them. Upon hearing this, Aldo and Anderson immediately rose to take their leave. If that's the case, then we won't disturb the Black Tower Wizard Academy, Aldo stood up and said, since this resource point was claimed by your Black Tower Wizard Academy, we at the Annihilation Wizard Academy will not interfere but as for your original point. Anderson also looked at Richard at this moment. One academy holding 2 resource points seemed excessive. How about dividing 1 point into thirds among the 3 of us? Richard suggested indifferently, we're all in the same camp, after all, sharing resources is only right. Anderson and Aldo were somewhat surprised, they hadn't expected Richard to agree to such an arrangement so readily. But, I have one condition. What condition? Anderson asked. I'd like to borrow some of the alchemy school apprentices under your command, Richard said with a smile. I find the camp constructed by the White Wizards quite nice, I plan to repair and utilize it. Construction of the camp. The 2 apprentice leaders immediately expressed some doubts. Repair the camp. Does Black Tower Wizard Academy think we will lose? Aldo said gravely, or is there a problem with the information you've told us? Richard waved his hand. I swear by the Sea of Souls, the information I've told you is not the slightest bit false. It's just that I am naturally cautious, and if you two are defeated, it would be good to have a fortress to hold, wouldn't it? When he finished, Richard playfully winked. Anderson and Aldo looked at each other, and the doubts in their hearts did not dissipate because of Richard's explanation. Instead, they grew even more. This was also a downside of being a black wizard. They found it hard to trust others. But for the time being, confirming the strength of the White Wizard apprentices was something that both academies needed to do, and since the three academies had no conflicts of interest, Richard had no need to deceive them. Thus, both academies ultimately chose to pursue the White Wizard apprentices. Annihilation Wizard Academy and Void Wizard Academy left a total of 30 Alchemy School apprentices with Richard. These apprentices, not strong, had survived the bloody examination purely by good luck. And now, being left here with Richard once again proved their luck. Talk about stingy, leaving behind only 30 apprentices. Richard clucked his tongue, then immediately arranged for these 30 apprentices and those from Black Tower Wizard Academy to start building defensive measures. Although there was not a hint of falsehood in what he had told Anderson and Aldo, he had a speculation in his heart that he hadn't shared with them. The growth rate of the White Wizard apprentices might be surprisingly fast. This speculation came from Richard's intuition. The White Wizards had reduced their casualties in 2 battles separated by only a few hours. If they fought a few more battles, those Ivory Tower students would quickly grow. At that time, the numerical advantage of the White Wizards would be greatly maximized. But these were only Richard's speculations. Under normal circumstances, Annihilation Wizard Academy and Void Wizard Academy amounted to 2/3 of the Black Wizard camp's fighting power. Taking a resource point that had just suffered a defeat should be a breeze. Even if the White Witch camp provided support, they could still retreat. The worst-case scenario would be a major defeat for the Black Wizards, but the likelihood of that was minimal. Following the White Wizards' remaining traces, Richard and a few alchemy apprentices discussed the construction of the camp. First came the wall. The foundations of the wall constructed by the White Wizards could still be found in the camp. Judging by the foundation, the wall was incredibly thick but not particularly tall. Richard surmised that the primary function of this wall was likely to elevate the wizard apprentice's field of vision while incidentally consuming a bit of the opposing apprentice's magic power. After all, maintaining levitation skill also requires magic power. Next were the traps outside the walls. According to Richard's thinking, magic arrays were best made to be manually activated, and the distance they were set had to be far enough from the camp. In the vicinity of the camp, it was enough just to place a few warning magic arrays. The undead wizard's puppet scouts would easily eliminate those activation puppets. Richard was also prepared for the possibility of the Black Wizards suffering a defeat. If they accidentally trapped their own people with trigger-style traps, it would be quite the joke. Next, wizards can fly, especially once they had built the walls. The White Wizards, if they attacked, certainly wouldn't go by ground. Magic arrays that could detect flying weren't non-existent, but that was something only wizards could handle. These apprentices better just stick to setting up on the ground. Having confirmed these 2 points, all that remained were some details. After discussing everything with a few apprentices, Richard began the construction work. Chapter 88. Construction was no difficult feat for a wizard. Building walls required a large amount of materials such as bricks, stones, lime, and more for common people, but for a wizard, an earth wall skill coupled with some reinforcement enchantments were enough to get the job done, and the effect was even better than what mortals could build. Following the plan, the apprentices cleared all vegetation within a 200-meter radius of the resource point and leveled the ground using mud to stone and fossil to mud. Then they built a rough wall at the edge with earth wall skill. The large trees that had been cleared were used by the apprentices to construct wooden huts, as accommodations were essential since the war was expected to last for some time. Meanwhile, the battle with the flame giant came to an end. It had grabbed the neck of the flame monster bird and extracted the element core hidden inside its body. The element core was greatly beneficial to elemental creatures, speeding up their growth. After devouring the core of the flame monster bird, the flame giant's strength surged and almost reached the standard of an advanced apprentice. Once the wall was completed, those from the alchemy school began to reinforce it with enchantments to ensure it wouldn't succumb to the elemental magic of the White Wizard apprentices. Next was the trap setup. 3 kilometers out from the resource point's center, the apprentices from the alchemy school began laying out arrays. As black wizards, these apprentices had a knack for setting traps. Various devious and covered magic arrays were densely positioned in the forest, and once activated, they were guaranteed to make any trapped white wizard beg for mercy. During the deployment of the apprentices, Richard gained a deeper understanding of warfare. He also realized the limitations of black wizards. Since black wizards focused too much on boosting their own power, this led to a complete ignorance of some auxiliary spells. In the process of building walls, out of over 300 apprentices, they found only around 30 who knew the earth wall skill. And that was at least somewhat useful earth wall skill. When Richard planned to construct a reservoir within the wall for water supply, not a single person in the entire camp knew the clear water creation spell. If Richard had been looking for lethal spells like ice cone skill, blizzard, ice fog skill, he was sure this group of apprentices would have provided plenty, but not a single one knew the non-lethal clear water creation spell. This meant that part of Richard's planning had to be declared a failure. For the water supply issue, they could only rely on the rivers in the forest. In light of this, Richard deduced some advantages of the white wizards by comparing their flaws. White wizards conducted warfare in a regimented manner, which meant that they had specialists trained in certain aspects, such as construction. They should have wizards who specialized in building fortifications. And for combat, they had wizards specializing in warfare. The advantage of such training was evident, it was convenient to specialize, and with the Wizard Academy's selection process, apprentices with talents in certain areas would be deployed where they could best utilize their gifts. Secondly, wizards trained this way might initially be very specialized, but they would surpass black wizards in their specialized areas. Even if black wizards worked themselves to death, they couldn't beat a white wizard who specialized in constructing fortifications. If this reasoning holds, then the Void and Annihilation Academies might be in some danger, Richard muttered as he watched the directions in which those two academies had gone. Unlike the Black Tower Wizard Academy, the Void and Annihilation Academies had gone to attack the white wizards. And they were white wizards with defensive structures. Even if the white wizards were incompetents, with fortifications to aid them, they would certainly put up a strong resistance. This was definitely not good news for black wizards. Fortifications could effectively reduce casualties among white wizard apprentices, and the war would temper them, maturing them, and building up their teamwork in the process. If the two academies failed to take down their targets, it would be akin to training troops for the white wizards. No, I must take a look. If the white wizards are anything like I suspect, then I'll have to change my strategy. Richard frowned and switched his view to Vuni, preparing to observe the battle from the sky. My lord, we are just 1 kilometer from the white wizard's resource point, a scouting black wizard reported. The white wizards have already built their wall and now seem to be laying out magic arrays and traps. Good, halt the advance, Anderson ordered. While Anderson had his doubts about Richard's intelligence, out of an inherent black wizard instinct, he was skeptical about information from strangers. But the corpses scattered across the resource point didn't lie, and neither did the number of Black Tower Wizard Academy apprentices. If the white wizards were not as weak as Richard had claimed, such a victory could not have been achieved. But, Anderson always felt that something was off inside. Like him, Aldo from the Annihilation Academy had the same feeling in his heart. It's not right, we have to prepare for retreat when we attack later, Aldo muttered to himself as he looked at the distant white wizard resource point. Having said that, he called over a few apprentice wizards from the alchemy school. You guys, prepare some triggerable magic arrays. Yes, boss. As both parties arrived at the location, Anderson and Aldo had their people agree on the time for the battle and the offensive front lines. The Void Academy, led by Anderson, would attack from the north, while the Annihilation Academy, led by Aldo, would attack from the south. The magic array traps from these two directions were not yet completed, many apprentices were still setting them up. Now was the perfect moment to strike unexpectedly. Watching the time on his pocket watch, Anderson pulled out his longsword, thrust it into the ground, and then clasped his hands together in prayer. My lord, today I offer this victory to you, may you bless me with your favor. After the prayer, Anderson seemed like a transformed person, becoming like a fanatic, his eyes filled solely with zeal and devotion. Void Academy, follow me, today I shall dedicate victory to my lord. At the same time, Aldo from the Annihilation Academy also began his attack. As an apprentice of the undead school, Aldo was most skilled at summoning the undead. In his magic pocket, he always carried the bones of 3 level 1 creatures. He had bought these corpses at a high price from the wizard commerce, and once resurrected, their strength would certainly be at the level of an advanced apprentice, which even a high advanced apprentice had to be careful to handle. For this battle, Aldo brought all 3 corpses back to life. With the eerie blue soul fire igniting in the eye sockets, 3 corpses once level 1 creatures were resurrected, coming back to this world. My lord. The 3 skeletons bowed slightly to Aldo. Aldo nodded in satisfaction and immediately commanded the 3 skeletons to rush to the front of the troop. At this moment, the white wizards were completely unaware of all this, still peacefully setting up their magic array traps. Until the flames of war descended. Master. Conqueror, sir. A white wizard apprentice found Ori, who was in his room devising strategies. What's the matter, why are you so flustered? Don't tell me the black wizards have broken in, asked Ori, frowning. The reporting white wizard apprentice nodded and shouted loudly. Master, it's the black wizards. They're attacking. What? Ori instantly stood up, pushed aside the reporting white apprentice, and went outside. The sounds of spell bombardments were incessantly coming in, the white wizards at the resource point were once again thrown into chaos. Damn it, everyone stop! Ori flew into the sky and bellowed down to the apprentices below, who were scurrying about like headless flies. Now! All apprentices listen to my command. Form up in number 1 array, ready to meet the enemy. Any apprentice who runs now will be treated as a deserter. As the commander, I have the right to execute them. Comment. Chapter 89. Ori's command stopped many of the apprentices in their tracks. These wizard apprentices were not old peasants temporarily conscripted by the nobles, they had received battlefield training in the academy. Now, they merely lacked experience. However, many apprentices completely panicked. Even though Ori had given the order, they still ran back in blind panic, completely disregarding the increasingly serious expression on Ori's face in the sky. Still running. Ori shouted in anger, then pulled out a magic wand from his magic pocket and waved it at a fleeing apprentice. Bang! A pale purple lightning bolt shot from the wand and struck the apprentice directly. Before the apprentice could activate his magic barrier, the lightning turned him into char. Anyone else who runs will end up like this. Ori shouted loudly. The example was a deterrent, and the remaining apprentices finally stopped in their tracks and began to arrange themselves according to Ori's commands. The white wizards had different formations depending on the enemy they faced. In a situation like the present, Ori chose the most conservative number 1 formation. He knew that this group of apprentices under him could not withstand major casualties. And the number 1 formation was particularly outstanding in defense. Number 1 formation was a semicircle, the outermost layer specialized in defense and close combat response, the next layer specialized in long-range attacks, the third layer served as support and firepower replenishment, and the last layer was the command layer, Ori's position. Apprentices arranged themselves according to the formations they had learned in the academy, having been specifically trained for their roles and having no doubts about where they should stand. Unfortunately, most of the apprentices were not on Ori's side at the moment, hence his formation looked very peculiar. The outermost layer, which should have had the most people, now had the fewest. The third layer, which should have had the fewest, now had the most. But at this moment, Ori had no time to care about these details. Having a formation meant having organization, and having organization was better than no organization. Advance north. Ori commanded. At this moment, on the north side of the resource point, the apprentices from the Void Wizard Academy were massacring left and right. Anderson's black robe continuously dripped blood downward, and his long sword was also covered in fresh blood, emitting a strange red light. Haha, Black Tower Academy was right, these white wizards are indeed as weak as chickens. Anderson laughed loudly, turning around to split an incoming fireball into 2. The bursting flames swept over his body, but a light red barrier blocked all the fire elements. He strode forward, heading towards the apprentice who had launched the spell. His presence was like an evil ghost from hell, frightful enough to shatter the courage of ordinary people with a single glance. But the spell-casting apprentice was no ordinary person either, dressed in a white wizard robe, his heroic face and long white hair fluttered on the battlefield. Facing the fierce Anderson, there wasn't a trace of panic in his eyes. The white-haired apprentice pointed his finger, and several ice cones appeared by his side, rotating and shooting towards Anderson. Anderson, undeterred, raised his red sword and deflected the incoming ice cones. Seeing that the spell was ineffective, the white-haired apprentice stepped back, waved his magic wand, and a cloud of white fog emitted from the wand's tip, enveloping Anderson. Ice Fog Skill. Anderson frowned, recognizing what this spell was. Ice Fog Skill was a spell aimed at individuals with exceptional physique, as the micro-ice crystals within the fog would enter the organism's body through the skin and respiratory pathways, causing them to become sluggish and even frostbitten. This was also the initial version of the ice fog skill. Nowadays, most wizard apprentices would modify the ice fog skill to enhance its maintenance time and even its freezing damage energy level. It seemed like this white-haired apprentice was no ordinary person, the ice fog skill had likely been modified by him. Thus, even though Anderson was an advanced apprentice, he did not dare to be unprotected. The ice fog skill I've modified has smaller ice crystal particles, higher penetration efficiency, and greater damage. The voice of the white-haired apprentice came from outside the fog. Specifically to deal with you brutes who rely on brute strength. But within the fog, a fiendish smirk curled the corners of Anderson's lips. Brute strength. He suddenly glowed in his eyes, staring directly at the position of the white-haired apprentice. So playing close combat means I'm a brute. Suddenly, a spiritual tentacle shot out from Anderson, instantly breaking through the white-haired apprentice's mental defenses. Anderson was not a physically focused alchemy wizard apprentice, he was a genuine soul wizard apprentice. He only engaged in close combat because he had learned a spell from the imaginary god that was helpful for melee, and secondly, to deceive naive individuals like the white-haired apprentice. Who told you that melee combatants must specialize in physical strength? As Anderson's spiritual power wreaked havoc, blood started dripping unceasingly from the white-haired apprentice's eye sockets, nose, and even ears. At this moment, his skull had turned into mush, and brain matter mixed with blood continuously flowed out of his orifices. After dealing with the white-haired apprentice, Anderson walked out of the ice fog, moving his body. The effects of the ice fog skill were indeed powerful, he had only stayed inside for less than 2 seconds, and his body had stiffened, with some areas having turned ominously black from frostbite. If this apprentice had been more experienced in combat, Anderson might have actually encountered difficulty in the ensuing fight. Anderson scanned the battlefield. By now, those white wizards with poor mental fortitude and timidity had almost been wiped out, and the remaining white wizard apprentices had finally regrouped, gathering in groups of 3 or 5 to start fighting back against the black wizards. Chapter 90. Adapting so quickly. Anderson frowned. The adaptation speed of the white wizard apprentices had far exceeded his expectations. Although the assault from the Void Academy had shattered their defenses, the lack of command meant these black wizard apprentices hadn't managed to surround and annihilate the enemy with concentrated troops immediately. The black wizard apprentices had indeed achieved rich battle results, but that could not withstand the fact that the white wizards far outnumbered them. We can't keep this up, we must quickly defeat these white wizard apprentices. Anderson made his decision, but before he could act, a series of spells bombarded him. 10 o'clock direction, distance 350, left 10 fireball technique, ready. Ori's voice rang out on the battlefield. A group of white wizard apprentices arranged in a semicircular formation was slowly advancing towards the battlefield, and their formation was growing larger as they moved forward. White wizard army. Anderson dodged the spell, looking in the direction of the casting with some panic. Dozens of wizard apprentices were brewing spells, and in front of them, several wizards were intently watching Anderson. As soon as Anderson retaliated, they would immediately erect a magic shield, fulfilling their duty to defend. Fire! At Ori's command, 10 fireballs immediately flew towards Anderson. Anderson hastily dodged. Although these fireballs were not very powerful individually, once their number increased, they could fatally strike advanced apprentices like Anderson. Void Academy, assemble! Anderson suddenly yelled across the battlefield, finally recognizing the terrifying nature of the white wizards. This type of spell bombardment, apart from a top apprentice like him, few on the field could withstand it. Humph! Thinking of running? Ori snorted coldly and then began giving orders. 12 o'clock direction, distance 370, left 3 lightning strike. 2 o'clock direction, distance 250, right 4 fireball bombardment. 1 o'clock direction, distance 460, mid 4 lightning strike. As Ori issued command after command, spells harvested black wizards lives on the battlefield like grim reapers. These black wizard apprentices didn't have Anderson's capabilities. Facing multiple spell attacks, their magic shields were instantly shattered, a torrent of spells instantly reduced them to ashes or charred them. Some apprentices tried to retaliate, but their spells were blocked by the magic shields in front of the white wizards, posing no threat to the spell-casting apprentices behind them. It was now the black wizard's turn to be slaughtered. Damn it, prepare to retreat! Anderson yelled with an ugly expression, then threw his long sword towards the white wizard army formation. The blood-red longsword tore through the air, bringing with it a fierce wind, the white wizard apprentices in front of the army took defense measures, but before the sword could touch the magic shield, it exploded on its own, enveloping a group of white wizard apprentices in a cloud of blood mist. The white wizard apprentices who came into contact with the blood mist instantly had their eyes turn red, attacking indiscriminately. Mad demon blood fog, should hold them off for a while. Anderson glanced back at the white wizard army formation, his figure then disappearing into the woods. Resource Point Southside, Annihilation Academy also ran into trouble. Roar! A skeleton with soul fire burning in its eyes let out a silent howl, then was blasted into pieces by a spell. The south side of the resource point was mostly inhabited by advanced apprentices, who had quickly deployed their strategies at the start of the battle, although the results were somewhat lacking. Due to a lack of decisive actions, the commanding system at the southern resource point was like a schizophrenic mental patient with multiple personality disorders, sending apprentices here and there erratically. Because they hadn't made timely use of wartime laws, namely the law of executing deserters. The result was that although there were more apprentices on the south side of the resource point than the north side, their resistance against the Black Wizards was less effective. Despite this, with the assistance of advanced combat abilities and alchemy machines, the southern resource point was barely held. Balto, known by his nickname Mechanic, was an advanced alchemy apprentice of the alchemy school, majoring in alchemy mechanical science. In this war, Balto was the only one who could match Richard financially. At the Secret Keeper Wizard Academy, Balto had even taken business from the wizard commerce by continuously providing a type of alchemy equipment with his alchemy machines. This made Balto extremely wealthy. For this war, Balto had made the same decision as Richard to exchange for a large amount of alchemy materials. Besides that, Balto brought some things Richard didn't have. On the city walls, the magic stone-driven alchemy magic stone cannon emitted a dazzling white light. Powered by the magic stones, the alchemy magic stone cannon could release a blast of up to 150 energy levels twice per minute. On the battlefield, except for a few advanced apprentices, whoever it hit was dead. It was also because of the deterrence of this magic stone cannon that many black wizards fought hesitantly, always keeping part of their attention on the alchemy magic stone cannon. "Have we consolidated yet?" Standing by the cannon, Balto anxiously asked as he continually used a spell to cool it down. "Sir, it's still not working," reported a white wizard, shaking his head. "Those 3 skeletons are too fierce. Every time our formation starts taking shape, they disrupt it. Our spells are almost ineffective against them. Now, no apprentices are willing to form a formation." "Unwilling?" Balto cursed angrily. "Do they want to die? In terms of individual combat capability, can the 3 of them measure up to a black wizard apprentice? Without forming a military formation, we are just slowly committing suicide." After saying this, Balto filled a few magic stones into the magic stone cannon, and the lethal white light lit up again, causing many black wizard apprentices to hurriedly take cover. "Order the other staff to quickly organize their own military formations, no matter how small, they must form a formation," Balto ordered, feeling a bit weary. At this moment, he actually wished that his old rival Ori was here. With Ori's capability and spirit, he definitely could have consolidated the apprentices for a counterattack. But it was too late to say anything now. At the resource point on the north side where Ori was, there were even fewer wizard apprentices. Yet, they also faced an attack from a Black Wizard Academy. He just needed to lead the apprentices in holding the line. As long as he firmly kept the defense, once the White Wizard army formation on his side was assembled, it would be the time for the Black Wizard's defeat. Boom, boom, boom. A series of explosions erupted from the Black Wizard's flank. Startled, Balto quickly looked over. He saw a neatly arranged White Wizard army attacking the flank of the Black Wizard apprentices. Each spell cast took out several Black Wizard apprentices. Have other academies finally come? Balto thought in amazement. The White Wizard army before him looked spirited and full of fighting spirit, in stark contrast to his own White Wizard apprentices. Balto naturally thought of the remaining 2 academies. Prepare to counterattack. Reinforcements have arrived. Balto shouted, as his alchemy magic stone cannon emitted a deadly white light again. Seeing the arrival of such strong reinforcements, the White Wizard apprentices at the southern resource point felt a surge of adrenaline and instantly perked up. Formation, formation, reinforcements have arrived. At this moment, Aldo, who was in the woods controlling skeletons to hunt the apprentices, saw this scene and instantly made a decision. Retreat. Retreat. The apprentices of the Annihilation Academy received the order and immediately broke away from the battle, running into the woods. The White Wizard army didn't pursue, allowing the Black Wizards of the Annihilation Academy to escape. I wonder which academy these reinforcements belong to, entering the battlefield with such calm. Balto admired to himself as he watched the reinforcements. But before he could approach, a familiar emblem caught his eye. They. Secret Keepers Academy insignia. Confused, Balto looked towards the army's command echelon, only to see a familiar figure quietly watching him. Balto, is this the outcome your staff has managed to produce? Chapter 91. Ori. Balto looked at the most core figure in the White Wizard army and uttered an incredulous sound. It's me. The White Wizard army split in the middle, clearing a path for their commander, Ori. Armed with better equipment than ours, and a larger number of people, yet we only just managed to hold our defense. Ori walked up to Balto, and with the sunlight falling behind him, Balto could not clearly see his face, feeling an oppressive pressure suffocating him. Is this how your staff conducts warfare? Balto opened his mouth to say something in defense, but in the face of the ironclad truth, everything he could say seemed weak and meaningless. Ori ended the newly created staff department with a single battle and took back power. Count the casualties, Ori said indifferently. Yes, Balto responded with a bitter echo. The tally was quickly reported. In this battle, the Black Wizards had lost 100 men, while nearly 400 had perished on the White Wizard side. Including those who had died in previous battles, in just one day, the Secret Keeper Wizard College had lost over half of its apprentices. Nevertheless, on that very day, the apprentices of the Secret Keeper Wizard College were tempered by blood and fire, and their fears of the cut and thrust of battle were no longer as they had been before. Perhaps this is why the colleges conduct apprentice wars, Ori murmured to himself as he looked at the casualty figures in the meeting room. He remembered his mentor telling him that the initial casualty rate in the White Wizard Army's first battle was an astonishing 50%, which, even after integrating fresh and experienced troops and with the aid of war machines, only dropped to 30%. The high death rate was due not only to the extreme dangers of conquering other planes but also partly to the White Wizards themselves. Some White Wizards performed exceptionally poorly on the battlefield, showing even less competence in large-scale war than natives. However, this apprentice war, facilitated by the hands of the Black Wizard apprentices, had cleared out the deadweight among the White Wizard apprentices, greatly improving the remaining students' quality. At the very least, they wouldn't wet their pants on the battlefield anymore. Let's take a break, hand all the wounded over to the apprentices of the Undead School for treatment, and those who aren't injured should repair and fortify our resource points, Ori ordered. Yes. After a while, the advanced apprentices from the Secret Keeper Wizard College entered the meeting room again. This time, Ori sat in the main seat at the far end of the room. After these two battles, our apprentices have grown. Next, I plan to rest for a while and allow the lower apprentices to absorb what they've learned from the two battles, Ori said, tapping his knuckles on the table. Does anyone have any objections? Several advanced apprentices looked at each other, but in the end, no one spoke. Since there are no objections, then it's decided. Thump, thump, thump. Just as Ori's words fell, the door to the meeting room was knocked on. Opening the door, a White Wizard apprentice whispered something to the person who opened it. The other two academies have arrived, said the White Wizard who had opened the door. Ori stood up. Let's go meet them then. High above in the sky, Vuni kept circling over the White Wizard's resource point. Using the distortion of light and altitude, the Death Crow remained undetected. The White Wizards have started to fight as an army. This is not good news, Richard muttered to himself. The trial of war had rapidly accelerated the growth of the White Wizards, and the Black Wizards' haphazard assaults only hastened this process. During the attack by the two academies, Richard could clearly see that the Black Wizard apprentices were fighting independently, while White Wizard apprentices trended towards group combat. Even though the Black Wizard apprentices were powerful individuals, they were troubled when facing several apprentices whose nominal combat power was close to their own. If Richard were in command, he would have them perform cutting and encircling attacks, colloquially known as dumpling making. Concentrate superior forces, swiftly cut through the White Wizard apprentices' defense, and then surround and annihilate them. Unfortunately, the other two academies' leading apprentices did not share Richard's strategic thought. They could only cut through the defenses and then let the apprentices fight for their own victories. This approach fit well with the Black Wizard ethos but was ill-suited for war. The two new academies, according to the rules, should be the Clear Frost Wizard Academy and Aurora Wizard Academy. Richard observed the two new groups of white wizard apprentices appearing on the ground, speaking to himself. From the sky, the two groups of white wizard apprentices had gathered outside the resource point and seemed to have some minor friction with the apprentices of the Secret Keeper Wizard College. "Why can't we go in when we're all white wizard apprentices?" an apprentice shouted loudly at those guarding the resource point entrance. Looking at the badge on his chest, this was an Aurora Academy apprentice. "Indeed, we're allies according to the rules, aren't we allowed in our own allies' resource point?" a Clear Frost Wizard Academy apprentice added. Just now, these two academies had arrived at the resource point fashionably late. Their timing was cunning. Almost immediately after the Black Wizard apprentices departed, this group appeared. Because of the Black Wizard's slaughter, the Secret Keeper Wizard College was in a state of sorrow and rage, and the two latecomers were naturally suspected of deliberate timing. It seemed too coincidental that they arrived just after the other group left. But coincidentally, that's exactly what happened. Chapter 92. Unlike the Secret Keeper Wizard College, the apprentices of these two lacked a leader with enough prestige among them, hence, the moment they entered the secret realm, the struggle for leadership began for both colleges. After vying for leadership, both colleges, following the regulations of the White Wizard's Manual, began to build defensive measures at resource points, which took a considerable amount of time. Upon completing these tasks, there was more internal squabbling within each group, and they ultimately decided to send people to the resource point where the Secret Keeper Academy was located to exchange information and form an alliance. The timing just happened to coincide with the end of the great battle between the Secret Keeper Academy and the Black Wizards. "Rules are rules, without a commander's order, none of you can enter," the guarding White Wizard said sternly to the outside White Wizard apprentices, completely disregarding their protests. After experiencing war, the apprentices of the Secret Keeper Wizard College looked upon these apprentices who had not been through battle with a mix of pride and pity. These people still had no idea what awaited them. The guard's words prompted another wave of discontent, but this time the dissatisfaction did not last long. Because Ori's order came down. "Let them in." Ori exchanged some information with the leader apprentices, or rather, the representative apprentices from the two colleges. He shared some of the Secret Keeper Academy's experiences with them. "Are you saying that we White Wizards can't possibly win against the Black Wizards the first time we face them?" "Unless we lay a trap and set up an ambush," said the representative apprentice from Clear Frost Academy. This representative, named Greg, was over 2 meters tall and sported a red beard, giving him quite the wild warrior vibe. "Pretty much," Ori said blandly. "Without going through the trials of war, our apprentices are far behind the Black Wizard apprentices in quality." "It sounds incredible, but looking at the rules this time, it seems to be the Academy's very intention." The representative apprentice from Aurora Academy picked up the conversation. This representative was an undead wizard named Manasseh, and when he spoke, 2 flickering blue soul fires danced in his eye sockets. "Get rid of the low-quality apprentices among us and make wizards more elite." Ori did not express agreement or disagreement upon hearing this. "Are you two about to go train your troops?" Ori inquired. As he spoke, Ori walked with the 2 representative apprentices down the street. A continuous sound of crying echoed throughout the resource point, as many apprentices had lost their lives in the war, men and women of various relations to those who survived. But without doubt, there had been affection between those who had died and the living apprentices. The heavy burden of death weighed upon the hearts of these living apprentices. Parting in life and death is a rite of passage every wizard must endure. Ultimately, the aim of the Wizard Academy was to provide soldiers for the plain battlefield. Greg had trouble catching his breath under the weight of the resource point's sorrow. The savagery of war left this ivory tower apprentice somewhat at a loss. "Do you remember the rules of war victory?" Ori suddenly asked. "There will be fewer than 2 resource points left, or the number of apprentices has halved," Manasseh said with a grave voice. "The academies have already prepared for death, they've drawn a line for us. So both of you should think about it," Ori said softly. "Death is inevitable." In the sky, Richard observed the White Wizards from the other 2 academies beginning to leave. But the direction of their departure seemed off. Why were they moving towards his location? Fortunately, night fell not long after, and the White Wizard apprentices did not choose to march at night but decided to camp on the spot. Are they planning to attack the public resource point? Richard switched his vision back to himself and pinched his eyebrow anxiously. Knock, knock, knock. Richard's room door was knocked on. Since arranging the city's defenses, Richard had stayed in this room, using Vuni to observe the movements of the white wizards. "Who is it?" "Boss, my name's Doug. I've caught a magic beast, would you like a taste?" "Magic beast?" Richard realized it was someone trying to suck up to him. "All right, I've got it." Richard stretched his body and walked out of the room. Outside the room, the entire resource point had undergone a huge transformation. Thick city walls had been erected, with apprentices keeping watch on top, and various wooden huts had been built within the resource point. Apprentices walked down the streets, those who were acquainted gathered together, lit bonfires, and chatted while eating dry rations. The day's skirmish might have been a painful memory for white wizard apprentices, but for black wizard apprentices, such battles were just part of daily life. The apprentice named Doug approached Richard, presenting a well-roasted magic beast thigh as if offering up a treasure. The thigh, sizzling with fat and brushed with spice, emitted an aroma that was tantalizing. "Boss, this meat from the magic beast is really chewy, I guarantee you'll like it." Richard didn't find Doug's flattery repulsive, he took the thigh, tasted it, and nodded. "It is indeed good." "Good is good, good is good," Doug nodded obsequiously, "if you want more, I've got some." "No need." Richard waved his hand, "You're called Doug, right? Which school do you belong to?" "Reporting to the boss, Alchemy School." "Alchemy School? What level are you at? And in what area?" Doug gave a subservient smile, "I study alchemy machines. My skills are passable, but far inferior to yours, boss." "Alchemy machines, not bad." Richard nodded, then took out a contract from his pocket and wrote a few terms on it. "Sign this, and you can stay in the rear." Doug's abilities were mediocre. Judging by the magic fluctuation emanating from him, Doug was probably at the level of an intermediate apprentice entering the field, likely because he had not changed his meditation method and was still using the basic meditation method. Such an apprentice would probably just be feeding free kills on the battlefield. Doug took the contract and saw that it required him to help Richard manufacture some alchemy parts and alchemy potions, and he must not reveal any information to the outside world. After the war, he would also have to undergo memory erasure by a soul wizard. Doug looked at the contract and gritted his teeth before signing his name. Although the contract terms were somewhat harsh, they were nothing compared to going to war and facing certain death. "Done." Richard yawned and pulled out a sheepskin scroll from his magic pocket, handing it to Doug. "Do exactly as it says there. Be meticulous." Then Richard handed Doug another magic pocket filled with alchemy materials. Having Doug manufacture alchemy parts was a spur-of-the-moment decision by Richard. Doug was an apprentice of the alchemy school, and Richard had a batch of alchemy materials to deal with. Since Doug would be just a free kill on the battlefield, it was better to leave him in the rear to work for Richard. Hearing this, Doug retreated with profuse thanks. After finishing the magic beast leg, Richard returned to the room to start monitoring the movements of the white wizard apprentices. In the dense forest, despite the lessons from the fall of the Secret Keeper Academy, these white wizard apprentices still didn't understand the brutality of war. Richard even saw some male and female wizard apprentices coupling, and they had even left the camp for it. Great, if it weren't for the proximity to the resource point of the Secret Keeper Academy, these people would all be doomed in the forest tonight. Through Vuni's night vision, Richard could clearly see several black wizard apprentices scouting the camp. And the white wizard apprentices' sentinels were as good as dead, having noticed nothing. "Are those apprentices from the Void Academy?" Richard maneuvered Vuni through the forest and eventually located the hidden enclaves of the Void Academy and the Annihilation Academy. After their defeat, these two academies had not chosen to return to their resource points to fortify. Instead, they chose to lie dormant in the forest. "Boss, these white wizard apprentices and the apprentices at the resource point aren't from the same group," a scouting black wizard apprentice reported. "How about we launch a night raid tonight?" Anderson and Aldo gathered together and exchanged glances. "A night raid does sound like a good idea." "Are you in?" asked Anderson. A flicker of soul fire surged in Aldo's eyes. "He, of course." Chapter 93. Under the cover of night, the black wizard apprentices silently advanced toward the white wizard apprentices' camp, yet the camp's inhabitants remained blissfully unaware. They gathered in small groups around the bonfire, discussing their future with each other. Then the spells descended. Boom! The sudden burst of spell explosion startled the apprentices, who all stood up and looked in the direction of the noise. But before they could discern what was happening, spells rained down on them like hail. "Enemy attack! Enemy attack!" a white wizard apprentice shouted in panic. Chaos reigned in the camp as the white wizard apprentices were caught off guard by the night attack and scrambled towards the resource point in a frantic dash. Gather! Everyone, keep it together! A commanding shout rose above the crowd as Greg quickly enlarged into a towering figure over 3 meters tall. Earth spread over the giant's body, forming a set of earth element armor. Organize a counterattack. All squad leaders, organize a counterattack. Deserters will be treated as such. Greg roared and turned to charge at the attackers. The black wizard apprentices, draped in black robes, resembled death gods reaping souls in the darkness, but they hastily dodged when faced with Greg. The gulf between average and top-tier apprentices couldn't simply be bridged by a single black wizard. Greg let out another roar, stunning several black wizard apprentices. He stomped the ground, and spikes of stone erupted, impaling the disoriented adversaries. Greg's actions undoubtedly brought some calm to the white wizard apprentices, whose fear instantly dissipated amidst the comforting presence of a powerful ally. Regroup and teach these black wizard apprentices a lesson. Let them see the might of we white wizards. The squad leaders among the white wizards began to rally their apprentices for a counterattack, but soon they witnessed a sight that made their legs buckle. I thought we were up against a top-level apprentice, but it's just an advanced apprentice with a fused bloodline. Aldo's eyes, filled with soul fire, swirled intensely as two undead creatures resembling canines emerged from the woods, constantly clashing with Greg, each strike ripping large swaths from Greg's armor. In addition to these two undead beings, a monstrous bone serpent over 10 meters in length slithered out of the forest, heading straight for the camp. 50 meters ahead, prepare the fireball technique. A squad leader barked orders, but before the apprentices could cast their spells, the giant serpent disrupted their formation and sliced open the leader with its bone spikes, spilling blood everywhere. The white wizard apprentices attempted to counterattack, but the serpent's body seemed as durable as iron. Their spells at best left shallow marks and at worst, only black smudges. Damn it! Greg wanted to turn back and provide support but was tightly bound by the two undead chasing him. Any slip would enable them, along with Aldo, to tear him to shreds. Cackle, you're still too green compared to Secret Keeper Academy. Aldo laughed wickedly as he watched the white wizard apprentices getting slaughtered in the camp. Without formation and command, the individual quality of the average black wizard apprentice was far superior to that of their white counterparts. In the melee, the white apprentices had no choice but to collapse in defeat. This was true for Clear Frost Academy, and Aurora Academy was no different. Today, I shall offer 88 heads to my god, to cleanse the shame of this day. Anderson shouted fanatically while his long sword continuously claimed the lives of white wizards. At his side, apprentices from Void Academy were relentlessly harvesting the lives of Aurora Academy's white wizard apprentices. Representing Aurora Academy, Manassi had to stand up and boost the morale of his fellow apprentices. Fanatic, I didn't expect to run into something like you. Manassi's eyes blazed with soul fire like two torches. He wielded a white bone wand, and summoned a over 3-meter-tall skeleton general clad in alchemy armor, looking imposing and majestic. An undead wizard? If I had known, I'd have asked for help from Annihilation Academy, Anderson grumbled, displeased at the sight of the skeleton general. The skeleton general's lack of flesh meant it couldn't provide sustenance for him. Losing the battle and not hastening to build defenses, have the black wizard apprentices lost their minds? Manassi manipulated the skeleton general towards Anderson, drying up and turning to mummies any black wizard apprentices that came into contact with it. Losing the battle? Anderson sneered coldly. What business is the power of Secret Keeper Academy to Aurora Academy? With that, Anderson pulled another long sword from his magic pocket and with swords in both hands, his aura transformed once more. Looking at Manassi, his gaze was unflinching, like a death god regarding the dead or an old sword saint watching a challenger. False personality. Manassi recognized Anderson's technique, and the soul fire in his eyes jumped violently. Aren't you afraid of being overwhelmed by the false personality, never to return? Anderson lifted his long swords, drawing a cross in the air. I've dedicated my body and soul to my god, and death holds no regrets for me. Madman! Manassi cursed angrily, then multitasked, controlling the skeleton general while using undead magic to harass Anderson. He knew that relying solely on the skeleton general would mean certain death. Chapter 94. Ding! Dong! Ding! A bone blade grew from the hands of the skeleton general, colliding constantly with Anderson's twin swords. In an instant, sparks flew around the dense forest and bone fragments scattered wildly. In his sword saint mode, every sword technique Anderson performed was exquisitely crafted, embodying countless secrets of the native master's swordsmanship. If it weren't for the fact that the skeleton general had no vital points, by now, it would have been pierced through the heart, viscera, and even the brain by Anderson. Manasseh found it increasingly difficult to control the skeleton general. As time went on, Anderson seemed to have figured out his control habits, making his attacks more effective. If he could not find a way to counter Anderson soon, his only option would be to flee in disarray. Although the gap between top white wizard apprentices and top black wizard apprentices was not as significant as that between ordinary apprentices, there was still a difference. Damn, now I can only hope for the Secret Keeper Academy, Manasseh sighed to himself. At the very start of the night raid, he had ordered an apprentice to seek help from the Secret Keeper Academy at the resource point. The apprentices of the Secret Keeper Academy, having been tempered by battle, were several times stronger in combat than those from the Aurora Academy and the Clear Frost Academy. Now, both academies had brought only half of their apprentices and were suddenly attacked by two Black Wizard Academies. Their only reliance was on the Secret Keeper Academy. Resource Point, Conference Room. The Black Wizards have launched a night raid. Ori looked serious as he faced the apprentice. Are you sure both Black Wizard Academies are involved? The apprentices of the White Wizard nodded incessantly like pounding garlic. I'm sure. Both we and the Clear Frost Academy have been attacked. At the Clear Frost Academy, an undead wizard resurrected 3 undead, 2 wolves, a snake, just like the apprentices from the Annihilation Academy you mentioned. All right, I understand. The Secret Keeper Academy will assist immediately. Ori waved his hand, signaling the White Wizard apprentice who reported the news to leave. Gentlemen, I have a plan, Ori said, leaning his hands on the table, his eyes sharp as swords. I want to annihilate these Black Wizards. In the conference room, other advanced apprentices were stunned, looking at Ori as if he were crazy. How do you plan to do it? Balto rubbed his temples. As Ori's old rival, he knew Ori's personality was arrogant, but he generally did not act recklessly. We still have around 700 apprentices on hand, about 600 of which are usable, Ori explained, sketching a rough diagram on the conference table with his wet finger. These 600, I plan to divide them into 3 groups. 2 groups will flank the route of the Black Wizard apprentices, and 1 group will go to support our allies. 200 to support allies. An apprentice frowned, that's not enough. Ori nodded, indeed, it is a bit few, but you need to understand, those we are supporting are not ordinary people. They are also White Wizard apprentices like us. We only need to help them stabilize their positions, and they can manage the counterattack themselves. Moreover, Ori paused, the other 400 aren't just sitting idle, they can flank from behind. Quite a greedy plan, Balto said expressionlessly, but the risk is indeed worth taking. If things could go as smoothly as Ori hoped, then this war would be over. A single remaining Black Wizard Academy would never be able to contend against a camp of over 3,000 White Wizard apprentices. The advanced apprentices looked at each other and nodded in agreement. Then it's settled. Gather the apprentices now. 400 to maneuver on both flanks and 200 to join me in battle. Ori stood erect, a hint of a crazed smile showing on his lips. The time had come to wash away their shame. Above the sky, Richard watched as the White Wizard apprentices at the resource point formed 3 squadrons, 2 of which immediately headed to the sides upon leaving the resource point, while only 1 squadron went to the camps of both academies. Damn, they're planning on encircling us. Seeing this, Richard immediately understood Ori's plan. The flanking maneuver on both wings was intended by the commander of the Secret Keeper Academy to end the war in one fell swoop. And you think I will let you have your way? Richard switched his view back and immediately left the room to begin gathering apprentices. Gather up! Gather up! During the war, not many wizard apprentices chose to meditate, so Richard soon gathered nearly 200 apprentices. The Void Academy and the Annihilation Academy are now in danger. Richard did not beat around the bush and immediately informed the apprentices of the current situation. Today, the Secret Keeper Academy, having been beaten down by us to the point of desperation, is aligning with 2 other academies to surround and annihilate the Void and Annihilation Academies. We need to support them now. You have 5 minutes to prepare, after which we will engage in a fierce battle. The White Wizard apprentices have already begun Legion combat, and we must take this battle seriously. We cannot underestimate it. The assembled Black Wizards looked at each other, with no protests or questions. They immediately began preparing for the imminent battle. Richard had ample reason. If the Annihilation Academy and Void Academy were surrounded and defeated, then this war was essentially over. If other regions with black wizards encountered problems, what awaited them was a bloody trial at the Academy. Rather than facing a bloody trial and competing with classmates, dealing with white wizard apprentices now seemed a bit more sensible. 5 minutes later, all apprentices were ready. Richard checked the number of people, kept it to 200, and then led the apprentices to the battlefield. The white wizard camp was now embroiled in intense combat. Greg was entangled by Aldo's 2 undead hounds and could not break free, although the apprentices from the Clear Frost Academy were constantly resisting. The undead giant python kept disrupting their formation. This caused significant losses for the Clear Frost Academy. Meanwhile, Anderson's long sword was about to dismantle the skeleton general, and no matter how Manasseh interfered with spells, he could not prevent the collapse of the skeleton general. It seemed everything was too late. Allies from the Aurora Academy, the Secret Keeper Academy is here to support. A loud shout spread throughout the camp, accompanied by a trademark of the White Wizard Army, the torrent of spells. Dozens of purple lightning bolts shot from their staffs, instantly turning 2 black wizard apprentices into charred corpses. Seeing the White Wizard Army arrive for support, the black wizard apprentices began to run towards the back. They were not fools. Killing inexperienced white wizard apprentices was one thing, but they dared not provoke the experienced White Wizard Army. Ori, overseeing the command, smirked coldly at this scene. Escape? Will you manage to escape this time? 12 o'clock direction, distance 250, prepare for the spiral ice cone skill to the left at 10. Ori gave the order, and 30 spiral ice cones materialized beside the apprentices, casting spells from a distance, targeting Anderson, who was grappling with the skeleton general. Fire! In an instant, 30 spiral ice cones, with trails of freezing mist, shot towards Anderson at lightning speed. Anderson's expression remained unchanged as he swung his 2 long swords, creating a barrier of sword light that effortlessly deflected all 30 ice cones. But only Anderson himself knew that his arms were already trembling slightly. His body was nearly at its limit. Retreat! Anderson issued the order and turned to run into the forest. Ori did not pursue. He immediately turned to support the Clear Frost Academy and called Manasseh to his side. Manasseh, I have a plan now and need the assistance of your Aurora Academy apprentices. The soul fire in Manasseh's eyes flickered. What's the plan? How can we help you? I plan to annihilate this group of black wizard apprentices, so I'm asking you to gather the apprentices and press forward with me against these fleeing black wizard apprentices. After finishing, Ori added. You don't really need to lend a hand. Just follow and scare these black wizard apprentices. Good. Manasseh did not hesitate, the soul fire in his eyes suddenly intensified. All wizard apprentices from Aurora Wizard Academy will fully cooperate with you. Chapter 95. At the Clear Frost Academy camp, Greg was still desperately holding on. His earth element armor was now scarcely remaining, but with a shout, reinforcements have arrived. The Annihilation Academy's black wizard apprentices began to retreat. Reinforcements? The Secret Keeper Academy. Greg glanced backward and discovered a regiment of white wizards slowly advancing towards his position. How disappointing, Aldo, seeing the regiment of white wizards from the Secret Keeper Academy, sneered and began to direct the undead to retreat. He hadn't yet become so arrogant as to confront a whole regiment of white wizards. Greg's predicament was instantly alleviated. Greg, I need Clear Frost Academy's help, Ori said, getting straight to the point as soon as they met. What kind of help? Greg's figure returned to normal, looking somewhat listless and drained. It seemed the recent battle had taken a heavy toll on him. I need you to rally the apprentices of Clear Frost Academy and push forward with me to crush these black wizard apprentices. Push forward. Greg frowned. What are you planning? A glint of sharpness flashed in Ori's eyes. I've already sent people to cut off the black wizard's escape route. As long as we push forward, there's a high chance we'll be able to eliminate all these black wizard apprentices. Hiss, that's a bold plan. Greg was taken aback by Ori's strategy, and after a brief moment of thought, he agreed to Ori's request. Clear Frost Wizard Academy will fully cooperate with you, but, Greg glanced at the white wizard apprentices in the camp, hesitant to continue. These white wizard apprentices, after this battle, had lost all their courage. If they encountered a breakout by the black wizard apprentices, they might become disorganized. Don't worry, Ori confidently smiled. Clear Frost Academy and Aurora Academy just need to make up the numbers. The actual fighting just needs you to prevent some scattered black wizard apprentices from escaping. All right. Greg agreed without hesitation, turning immediately to organize the apprentices. About 20 minutes later, the apprentices from Clear Frost Academy and Aurora Academy were assembled. This night raid had caused great losses to both sides, with over 800 apprentices dead, exceeding more than half of the number each side had brought. With a grim expression, Greg and Manasseh, whose soul fire was constantly flickering, met up with Ori. They now fully understood the experience of the Secret Keeper Academy. War was indeed too cruel. Now that you have both organized your forces, let's get started. Ori pointed toward the dense forest and corners of his mouth revealed a confident smile. This battle shall be the final war. On the other side of the forest, Richard was leading 200 black wizard apprentices towards the battlefield. In the meantime, Richard constantly switched his view to assess the situation, and upon seeing that the Void Annihilation forces had begun to retreat, he immediately ordered Vuni to hurry back. He now needed to locate those 2 regiments of the Secret Keeper Academy's White Wizards. "Boss, we're approaching the trap zone we set up ahead," reported a black wizard apprentice to Richard. Richard nodded. "Good, deploy a few alchemy apprentices here to stand guard, and after we complete the rendezvous, we'll rely on these magic array traps to buy us time." Vuni's flying speed was very fast, and with its high altitude, the range of sight was exceedingly vast. Therefore, in just a few minutes, he found traces of one of the White Wizard regiments. But the bad news was, this regiment was about to engage with the Void Academy. "Damn it," Richard cursed, immediately leading the apprentices to hasten towards the battlefield. If surrounded on 3 sides, the Void Academy and Annihilation Academy feared they would suffer heavy losses. Boom! An ear-splitting explosion echoed through the woods, catching the fleeing black wizard apprentices by surprise, causing them to immediately look for the spellcasters. White Wizard Army. Anderson saw the White Wizard Regiment a few hundred meters away, feeling a sudden chill in his heart. Had they been encircled? He thought carefully and realized that the force that came to the camp to provide support was only a small part and definitely not all of the White Wizard apprentices from the Secret Keeper Academy. No good, we must break out of the encirclement at once. Anderson decisively made a decision, leading the apprentices of the Void Academy to charge through. Charge through! Balto, commanding the White Wizard Army, sneered, then ordered the apprentices to start casting spells carpet style. "As long as you don't mind the high casualties, by all means, charge through." The spells followed a parabolic arc, falling beside the Black Wizard apprentices, forcing them to run backward. "Damn it, this way!" Anderson cursed, leading the apprentices to run toward the right side. Meanwhile, on another front, the Annihilation Academy also encountered the blockade of the White Wizard Army. "Damn, have we been surrounded?" In Aldo's eyes, the soul fire kept flickering, an indication of his extreme unrest. To the center, Aldo decided, leading the Annihilation Academy's apprentices to the left. Now, with opposition in front and pursuers behind, only by merging with the Void Academy could they use the combat power of higher-end apprentices to break free. Behind the 2 academies, the regiment of White Wizards led by Ori was leisurely pursuing the Black Wizard apprentices, along with Clearfrost and Aurora. The explosions coming from ahead proved that the White Wizard regiments he had sent out had already engaged with the Black Wizard apprentices. If those 2 academies weren't foolish, they should converge toward the center. Of course, the 2 academies might also disperse their apprentices and flee in every direction, but that possibility was slim. Because advanced apprentices, although relatively safe when in big numbers, once their numbers dwindle, they could easily be singled out. That would not be a good situation for the advanced apprentices. Chapter 96. Prepare to meet the enemy. Ori commanded. The apprentices of the Secret Keeper Academy, having been tempered by war, now grasped their magic wands firmly, displaying a semblance of the White Wizard Army's qualities. At the very least, they wouldn't scatter and flee at the first sign of spells or casualties. To the sides of the Secret Keeper Academy apprentices, those from the Clear Frost Academy and Aurora Academy also gripped their wands tightly. After experiencing a chaotic battle, these apprentices had learned a thing or two and could be considered raw soldiers fit for the battlefield. As the Secret Realm and Void Annihilation Academies joined forces, both sides realized they were completely surrounded. At that moment, the White Wizard Army led by Ori was about to enter spell range. The magic fluctuations from the White Wizard apprentices brewing their spells were even strong enough to stir a breeze in the forest. "It looks like we'll have to force our way out," Anderson said with a frown, decisively making his choice. Across from him, Aldo had reached the same conclusion. Although scattering the apprentices would allow more to escape, it wouldn't benefit them as advanced apprentices one bit. The outcome of the war mattered, but their own lives were of utmost importance. Prepare to break through. Use every escape trick you have. Anderson relayed the order, taking out a bottle of magic potion from his magic pocket. The potion looked a vivid red, resembling the blood of some creature. After consuming it, Anderson's body immediately exuded an eerie aura. Blood of a high-level vampire, nice find, Aldo complimented, and then took out a scroll from his pocket. Upon opening the scroll, a mysterious force instantly enveloped Aldo. Anderson's eyes turned blood red, and blood vessels spread across his body as he glanced at the scroll, saying with a hint of surprise, "A luck scroll. You actually managed to get your hands on something like this." Aldo's soul fire flickered, found it by chance during an adventure. The luck scroll was a long-lost piece of knowledge from the curse school, capable of temporarily enhancing the user's luck for a short time and repaying it with bad luck at a later time. But for someone facing death, living even a second longer was a gift. What did bad luck matter? Prepare to break through. The two leaders issued orders to the apprentices of their own academies, then took the lead in charging out. After ingesting the blood of a high-level vampire, Anderson's physique, healing abilities, and even his reflexes were greatly enhanced. At this moment, Anderson's physique had reached the level of a peak-level apprentice, which was more than adequate for a breakout. Beside him, Aldo appeared much more composed, swiftly moving through gaps in the spells without a scratch, like passing through a dense thicket without a leaf touching him. Behind him, numerous black wizard apprentices pushed forward against the onslaught of spells from the white wizard army, many being burned to ashes or electrocuted into charcoal. Stop them! The commanders of two white wizard army units issued orders, and the army began to move, forming a wall of despair to block the black wizard apprentices. Block your mother's head! A roar echoed from behind the white wizard army, and a black giant, similar to a demon god, holding a great sword ablaze with black flames, charged toward the army. Anderson, in the midst of the breakout, recognized the black giant at a glance. "Hail from the Black Tower Academy! Follow me and strike at the white wizard army!" Anderson bellowed. The white wizard army immediately shifted their target, hoping to swiftly defeat the black giant with a barrage of spells. 6 o'clock direction, 50 meters, prepare all lightning strikes. Fire! In the next instant, hundreds of bolts of lightning burst from the tips of the white wizard army's wands, nearly engulfing Richard with purple thunder. But in the next moment, the black giant reached the front lines of the white wizard army. He's still alive. The commanders of the white wizard army were shocked. Surviving a barrage of hundreds of spells could only be done by a wizard. To hell with you! The black giant bellowed angrily, with muscles bulging on his arms. He swung his great sword, cutting down the defense apprentices and bringing forth a burst of blood mist. The white wizard apprentices were stunned by the scene. What kind of monster was this, able to survive hundreds of spells? But at this moment, there was no time for them to think, because behind the black giant, hundreds of elemental spells were flying towards them. Boom! The white wizard apprentices scattered in all directions, even the commander advanced apprentice fleeing in panic. This was simply a monster. The encirclement was torn open, and the black wizard apprentices prepared to break through quickly escaped through the gap. Richard planted his great sword into the ground, black smoke continuously rising from his body, with a gash ripped open in his flesh at the back, and several magic stones drained of magic power fell out. His condition was not as heroic as the white wizard apprentices had perceived. Thanks to his adaptation body, Richard had developed resistance to elemental spells of fire, thunder, and ice below the 50 energy level. But reality wasn't a game, and resistance had its limits. One punch to the body might do nothing, but 100 punches would definitely pose a problem. At this moment, Richard could feel fire-like pain all over his body. His bloodline, in an effort to heal his body, had instantaneously drained 10 magic stones. At least the experience wasn't a total loss. I managed to intimidate them. Richard regained his strength and glanced at the pursuing white wizard army ahead. At that very moment, Ori also happened to be looking at Richard. Their eyes met, and a mutual sense of recognition arose between them. That person was his greatest enemy in this war. Richard pulled out his great sword and waved at Ori, then disappeared into the forest. Ori ordered the pursuit to continue, but the white wizard army, needing to march in formation, couldn't match the black wizard apprentices' speed of escape. Moreover, during the pursuit, they were attacked by a magic array trap. which further slowed them down. Watching the black wizard apprentices gradually vanish into the forest, Ori punched a tree beside him. Alas! So close, yet so far. At that moment, the commanders of the two white wizard army groups responsible for the encirclement also arrived by Ori's side. Dennis, why did you flee? Do you realize, because of your route, we've lost all the gains of the evening? Ori shouted angrily at one of the commanders. The commander called Dennis hung his head low, the image of Richard charging through their ranks flashing before his eyes. He had to admit, he could not muster even the slightest desire to resist that black giant. What kind of monster could withstand 100 spells? How could such beings appear on an apprentice battlefield? We encountered a monster, Dennis said bitterly. Before we rooted, that monster must have withstood nearly 100 bolts of lightning. But he was still alive, and even managed to charge at our formation. Dennis's face was filled with bitterness. Such an enemy. I can't bring myself to resist. Commander, punish me, I am willing to accept all responsibility. Ori exhaled after listening. You will be punished. But before that happens, reorganize your troops. Dennis's excuse was valid, even Ori himself would probably have only slowed the rout at Dennis's position. A monster that could charge against a legion under a barrage of spells was still too much for the apprentices of the Secret Keeper Academy at this point. But a valid reason did not mean exemption from punishment. Dennis was unlikely to get a commander's position again in this war. After the battle, the three academies tallied the casualties. The Secret Keeper Academy had lost more than 30 apprentices in this operation, while the other two, only supporting, had about a dozen deaths each. Including the casualties of the night raid, both academies had lost over half of their apprentices. But the result was substantial. During the operation, they killed approximately 150 Black Wizard apprentices. During the night raid in the melee, they killed 40 Black Wizard apprentices. Together, the two battles resulted in a loss of 1/5 of the Black Wizard apprentice camp. After the battle, the apprentices from the Aurora and Clear Frost academies immediately returned to their own resource points, the battle being a loss but also a growth opportunity. Mixing veterans of war with new troops was a way to effectively enhance the combat power of the newcomers. And at this very moment, outside the secret realm, the headmasters of the 6 academies were silently watching them. Chapter 97. Is the war progressing too fast, Clear Frost? The Black Tower Great Wizard looked at the glass dome before him, which enclosed the secret realm where Richard and the others were located, allowing him to see every move of all the apprentices clearly. Sitting opposite the Black Tower Great Wizard, the mage known as Clear Frost was an ice person, his whole body composed of a pale blue ice. Indeed, it's a bit fast. The Great Wizard Clear Frost exhaled a breath of cold air. It's only the first day, and all 3 battlefields are already a complete mess. But the results seem quite good. Next to the Great Wizard Clear Frost, a dazzling light cloaked in a cape sent out a wave of spiritual energy. He was the Aurora Great Wizard. Indeed, not bad. Our side has already started to have the capability of legion warfare, said a middle-aged man cloaked in a cape, his mouth and eyes sewn shut with risks, giving him a rather scary look. He was the Secret Keeper Great Wizard. The rules need to be changed, otherwise there would be nothing left for us to fight, stated a deep energy cloaked in a wizard robe. Once the White Wizard army fully adapts, the Black Wizards won't stand a chance. The first apprentice war, even the Great Wizards had made some minor mistakes. They originally designed the war to last about a year, with various reconnaissance, advances, confrontations, but as it looks now, the wizard apprentices didn't need any of it. At this rate, the war could end in another 2 days. They were too far from the apprentices, somewhat forgetting how scarce the apprentices' means were. There's no need to rush, Void, another Great Wizard, looking like a normal human just like the Black Tower Great Wizard, spoke up. Don't forget, the number of apprentices is also a condition for victory. But it's still unfavorable for us, the Black Tower Great Wizard continued. According to the plain battlefield simulation, Black Wizards occupy the positions of native powerhouses. Their numbers should be more than that of White Wizards, who should be relying on the superiority of legion warfare to strike them down one by one. But now it's the other way around. When have we ever encountered a war where wizards outnumber natives during plain conquest? Speak your mind, Black Tower, said the Great Wizard Clear Frost indifferently. The Black Tower Great Wizard let out a bizarre chuckle. Clear Frost, no matter how you look at it, you have the advantage this time. Our little guys are just here to serve as your whetstone. Shouldn't you make some gesture? Black Tower, you still love bargaining, the great wizard Clearfrost said with a hint of helplessness in his tone, how about one victory? If black wizards win a match, it counts as your win. Having said that, he then looked at Void and Annihilation, the two great wizards. Agreed. Agreed. Both great wizards agreed to this rule modification. Aurora, Secret Keeper, what about the two of you? The Black Tower Great Wizard looked towards the remaining two great wizards of the White Wizard camp. The two great wizards passed a spiritual message between each other, and also agreed to the rule change. The Black Tower Great Wizard clapped his hands, and a scroll bearing mystical energy appeared out of thin air. The Black Tower Great Wizard drew a couple of lines on it with his finger, and its content instantly changed. The contract is amended, let's continue watching. Inside the public resource point, the Black Wizard apprentice side also tallied the loss results. In this night raid, the casualties of Void Academy were greater, around 120 people, while Annihilation Academy suffered less due to the help of Aldo's undead puppets. After the casualty numbers were tallied, the commanders of the three academies gathered in the conference room to discuss the next strategy. Gentlemen, I think we need to make some adjustments to our strategy. Richard sat in his chair, his fingers tapping unhurriedly on the table. On either side of him, Anderson from Void Academy and Aldo from Annihilation Academy were silent and expressionless. How did you know we were being besieged? Aldo suddenly asked. Your timing was just right, even if I sent someone to call for help, it wouldn't have been possible. How did I know? Richard laughed and snapped his fingers. Vuni flew into the room from the window, settling comfortably on Richard's shoulder. Did neither of you think of magic pets? Anderson and Aldo were startled, and then a chill grew in their hearts. They had indeed not thought about magic pets. And by the looks of Richard, this magic pet might have been watching them for God knows how long, probably even monitoring their night raid. Magic pets, Anderson paused, that's indeed a blind spot. The secret realm was no stranger to magic beasts and a single crow on a branch would attract little attention. The White Wizard apprentices probably haven't noticed either, which is good for us, Aldo said with a serious voice. It's only a matter of time before we're discovered. Richard shook his head, the White Wizard Academy should have taught about magic pet reconnaissance. It won't be long before they realize something is watching them. What did you mean by changing our strategy? Anderson suddenly asked. The growth of White Wizard apprentices has been too fast. If we want to win the war, we must play to our strengths. A glint flashed in Richard's eyes. We should give up trying to win by seizing resource points. Instead, we should aim to reduce the number of White Wizard apprentices as much as possible. Cutting their numbers by half is also a way to victory. We are well aware of this, Aldo retorted, but trading losses with the White Wizard army, it seems like we're at a disadvantage. Richard smiled confidently in response, who said we're going to fight them head-on. Chapter 98. Anderson and Aldo exchanged glances, unable to fathom what Richard was really scheming. Both of you, we're not wizards, we're stronger than ordinary people, but we still need to eat and drink. Richard spoke leisurely. White Wizard apprentices can rely on magic arrays to solve their drinking water problem, but they can't conjure food out of thin air. Given the idiocy of this group of White Wizard apprentices, I doubt they brought much in the way of dry food. Therefore, going out to gather food is essential. Richard left the rest unsaid, but Anderson and Aldo had already grasped his meaning. If the White Wizard apprentices came out to gather food, then they could take the opportunity to attack. But Anderson found a problem. But what if they don't drag their feet? If they choose to consolidate their apprentices and quickly take down our resource points, what do we do then? They will surely drag it out for a while. Richard shook his head. They still have some who have never seen the battlefield. If they attack rashly and end up fleeing, wouldn't we win directly? Moreover, Richard pulled a magic stone out of his pocket. They need to replenish their magic stones, don't they? Due to the large number of apprentices at the White Wizard Academy, apart from a few top apprentices, the rest had far fewer magic stones than the Black Wizard apprentices. This resulted in many White Wizard apprentices running out of magic stone reserves after a day and night of intense combat. That makes sense. What's your plan? Anderson looked at Richard. Although they were both leaders among the apprentices, Richard always gave him an inscrutable feeling. This feeling didn't come from power, but seemed like an intellectual suppression. It's simple, Richard clapped his hands. We'll only defend 2 resource points and let the White Wizards attack the others. Then we'll split some of our elite apprentices into small teams to harass the White Wizard apprentices venturing out from their resource points. We'll kill as many White Wizard apprentices as possible. The two commanding apprentices thought for a moment and immediately realized it was indeed a good idea. Elite apprentices meant battles could end quickly, and they could swiftly disengage when pursuing. I agree. I also agree. Richard stood up. Since you both agree, let's get started. Just as Richard predicted, the apprentices from Clearfrost and Aurora did not make any major moves after their return. And since the Secret Keeper Academy began to focus on defense due to magic stone consumption, only small groups of white wizard squads went out daily for food hunting near the resource points. Wizard apprentices are not yet wizards, they can't rely solely on magic power to sustain their bodies. Therefore, food and water remain essential for the survival of wizard apprentices. When the white wizard squads went hunting for food, the black wizards naturally wouldn't sit idle. 3 academies from the Black Wizard camp selected 10 elite Black Wizard apprentice teams, each with 5 members, including apprentices from 5 different schools to handle any situation. These people were sent to hunt near the White Wizard resource points, attacking the White Wizard apprentices emerging from those points. Meanwhile, the remaining Black Wizards began fortification construction. The academies of Void and Annihilation, having suffered great losses, decided to defend a resource point together, while Black Tower Wizard Academy defended another by itself. Thus, the White and Black Wizard sides began a temporary standoff. "Run, Elisa," a White Wizard apprentice roared, turning to pounce on the attacking Black Wizard apprentice. His figure quickly grew in size during the lunge, transforming into a muscular, hairy beastman in an instant. Clearly, this was a bloodline alchemy apprentice. Facing him, the 5 Black Wizard apprentices skillfully widened the distance, and then 3 elemental spells blasted onto his body. The remaining 2 apprentices pointed toward the fleeing White Wizard apprentice as black chains emerged from the ground and wrapped around the White Wizard apprentice like a parasite. The other simply and cleanly followed up with another elemental spell. After the hunt was completed, the Black Wizard apprentices expertly stripped the White Wizard apprentice's body clean and then set a magic array trap underneath the corpse. "All right," the apprentice setting up the magic array trap whispered. After speaking, the 5 Black Wizard apprentices silently disappeared into the dense forest. Before long, a group of White Wizard apprentices found their way here. "Damn, let those bastards escape again." The leading White Wizard apprentice cursed angrily, with the apprentices following him also showing faces full of rage. This was already the 5th Black Wizard assassination incident this month. "Captain, no traces were found," reported one White Wizard apprentice. "Damn it, collect the bodies and take them back." As the White Wizard apprentices were moving the bodies, the magic array trap set by the Black Wizards triggered, and the exploding fire element spell instantly blew the nearest apprentice into chunks. "Ah!" The captain's eyes bulged in frenzy as he unleashed spells wildly into the surrounding dense forest. But by this moment, the Black Wizard squad had already moved far away, rendering his venting utterly futile. The 5th Black Wizard assassination incident, Balto handed a piece of paper to Ori. This time the Black Wizards left traps on the bodies, causing one search member to be blown to death. "Okay, I got it." Ori took the paper and glanced at it, massaging his temples with a headache. "Is this war?" Balto sat next to Ori, his heart churning with waves. For victory, the Black Wizard apprentices could cold-heartedly lay traps on the corpses of their own kind, which Balto found somewhat hard to accept. Even war should have some bottom lines. "Yes, this is war," Ori answered offhandedly. "The purpose of war is victory, and for this goal, we should be unscrupulous." "I understand that, but I still find it somewhat unacceptable." Balto exhaled deeply, as if trying to expel all the frustration from his heart. "We're all apprentices, all human, why should things be done so despicably?" "Despicably?" Ori scoffed. "Balto, you're too naive. You think what is this war simulating? What is it for? This war is to simulate the plain battlefield, where on the plain battlefield, the methods of those alien race monsters are 100 times more despicable. 100 times more vicious. They will kill wizards without any psychological burden and then use our corpses for their feasting. If you can't even accept this, how will you manage yourself when you get to the plain battlefield? Are you going to request to be transferred to rear logistics for a lifetime?" As a scion of a wizard family, Ori had learned about the cruelty of the plain war from his elders. On those gruesome battlefields, these selected wizards were just like small soldiers, dying in droves. Even great wizards might fall. The methods of those alien race monsters were countless, and sometimes for a wizard in their grasp, even death became a luxury. Now this was nothing more than using corpses to set traps. How far had they gone? Balto had no reply and shifted the conversation to countermeasures. This can't go on, we have to find a way to deal with these black wizards. A way, Ori pondered for a moment and said, I have a suggestion, let's group everyone who goes out to gather food together, don't disperse, and collect in the form of small troops. Balto frowned, that would be too inefficient, there won't be enough food. Not enough. Ori smirked coldly, we are in extraordinary times, we should use extraordinary measures. Collect all of the camp's food, and distribute it on a set schedule and amount to each person daily. As long as everyone is kept from starving, that's enough. In extraordinary times, everyone should endure a bit. What about the captain? Balto asked. The captain? Ori chuckled, even I am subject to rationing, could the captain's position be higher than mine? Chapter 99. The implementation of the rationing system and the small legion system caused the casualty numbers of the White Wizard apprentices to drop rapidly. Moreover, Ori did not withhold any secrets, he quickly passed these methods on to the other two academies, Aurora and Clear Frost, which also adopted the same systems. Besides this, the White Wizard apprentices also learned the skill of magic pet reconnaissance, making the Black Wizard's surprise attacks significantly more challenging. Richard, the strategy of surprise attacks has already become ineffective, Aldo remarked as he looked at the latest battle reports. 10 Black Wizard squads had not made any progress in the past month. It's normal for it to be ineffective, as it's not hard to deal with, Richard said calmly while sitting at a desk. So, what should we do next? Continue squabbling with the White Wizards? Anderson asked, standing by Richard's side. We have already dragged this on for 3 months. If this continues, the White Wizards will accumulate more and more magic stones. Richard sat in his chair, his expression calm and devoid of any panic. Why panic? We're not out of plans. What plans? Anderson and Aldo both looked baffled. I've been working on something recently, and it's almost ready, Richard said as he stood up and took them to a room in the corner of the camp. In the room, several alchemy apprentices were busily working on something. Is this alchemy weapons? Aldo recalled the alchemy magic stone cannons they encountered when attacking the Secret Keeper Academy. Each shot from those cannons could take down an apprentice, the deterrent effect was considerable. However, even the alchemy magic stone cannons would not be enough to solve their current predicament without at least a dozen. They were facing the White Wizard army, and the current White Wizard apprentices were not the same as those who fled after losing 1 or 2 companions. Even a piece of scrap iron, after being tempered by battle, had become usable scrap iron at this moment. Good eye. Richard complimented them, then went to a corner of the room where several wooden crates were stacked neatly, with no trace of magic fluctuation. Richard opened them, and Anderson and Aldo saw just a few black iron rods. What are these? Anderson couldn't help asking. He did not feel any magic fluctuation from these iron rods. Cannonballs. Richard uttered a term that both of them couldn't comprehend. Cannonballs? Do you mean these things are shot by the alchemy magic stone cannons? Aldo asked, confused. He remembered that the alchemy magic stone cannons seemed to fire energy, not physical cannonballs. No, these are not cannonballs for the alchemy magic stone cannons, these are my research achievements, which I call annihilation bombs. Saying so, Richard took out an annihilation bomb from the wooden box. The annihilation bomb was cylindrical in shape with a conical top, coated in a layer of black metal that appeared unremarkable. But to those who knew their stuff, they would recognize that the metal coating the bomb was the extremely expensive magic-resistant metal. This was also why they couldn't sense any magic fluctuation. Don't underestimate these things, if they explode, none of us can escape, Richard said lightly. Anderson and Aldo exchanged glances. They were somewhat incredulous that these things could kill them. Never mind, it's useless even talking about it. Richard put the bomb back in place, disappointingly waved his hand. The Black Tower Wizard Academy is located at a public resource point. The White Wizard apprentices are likely to attack me. You guys just need to defend your own resource points. No need for support. Aldo's soul fire flickered in his eyes as Richard's statements seemed too arrogant, thinking he could defeat the White Wizard army with just a few small things. This is not the time for boasting. If we lose, everyone will suffer back at the academy. Don't worry, the Black Tower Wizard Academy has nearly 400 people, which is not far off from your numbers, Richard said calmly. Since that's the case, then everyone should rely on their own skills. Aldo deeply looked at Richard, then left the room together with Anderson. Due to the changes in the strategy of the White Wizard apprentices, the 3 academies from the Black Wizard camp also recalled their Black Wizard squads. Since the small tricks had become ineffective, what remained was only a fierce and genuine fight. In the 5th month of the war, as the Magic Stone transport ended, Ori decided to begin the offensive. Aurora and Clear Frost academies also responded, deciding to advance and retreat together with the Secret Keeper Academy. The White Wizard army arrived mightily at the resource point of the Secret Keeper Academy, where the apprentices had now acquired the basic qualifications to battle, and some had even reached elite levels. Gentlemen, today is a good day. Ori flew into the sky as the White Wizard army stood neatly on the ground. Today, our magic stones have arrived, and so has the day for our revenge. In these 4 months, many among us have fought with the Black Wizard apprentices, our friends, relatives, and even lovers have died at the hands of the Black Wizards. Every day, we enter our dreams with tears in our eyes, and our deceased loved ones are constantly asking us in our dreams, when will we avenge them? Today, we can finally answer them. Today, we will avenge them. We will blast those sons of bitches, the Black Wizard apprentices, into pieces with spells, burn them to ash with flames, and char them with thunder. Today we fight for revenge. After Ori finished speaking, a voice rose from the ground, spreading through the White Wizard army like a plague. Chapter 100. He said, "Revenge. Revenge. Revenge." The situation at the White Wizard resource point was accurately conveyed to Richard by Vuni. Vuni's flying altitude and the spells inherent to its body were enough to avoid detection by most wizard apprentices. The battle is finally about to begin, Richard muttered to himself. The war was finally coming to an end. Gather. All apprentices assemble. Richard stepped out of the room and quickly gathered all the apprentices at the resource point. Fellow apprentices, the White Wizard apprentices are about to launch the final battle. Richard flew in the sky, his gaze calmly sweeping over the Black Wizard apprentices on the ground. At the White Wizard's side, they have shouted the slogan of revenge, vowing to shatter us into slag. I also want to shout a slogan, but unfortunately for us Black Wizards, we are well accustomed to death. So I thought of a new slogan. Survive. Fellow apprentices. We understand the value of life better than those White Wizards grown in greenhouses, who among us hasn't climbed to where we are now over the bodies of others. Our war has no other purpose, we only want to survive, to do anything to survive. Richard swung his fist, his voice echoing like a magic spell throughout the resource point. Soon, the ground's Black Wizard apprentices were infected by Richard's fervor, they too started to roar. As if venting their dissatisfaction with the world, their grievances against the Academy, and their loathing for fate. They were a group of ghouls, having lived to this moment by relying on the corpses of others. They had no intention of throwing away the lives they had struggled so hard to obtain. Survive. 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 The war had begun. As per the plan, Richard dispatched 10 alchemy school apprentices to detonate the traps within the magic arrays. These apprentices wore the best stealth magic clothes, all to hide from the magical pet scouts of the White Wizard army. For this, Richard, the extravagant alchemy apprentice, had drawn up contracts with the apprentices who provided their magic clothes. Should their magic clothes be damaged in this war, Richard would personally make another set of stealth magic clothes for them after the war ended. The White Wizard army at the resource point split into 2 factions, one with fewer numbers bypassed the resource point where Richard was and prepared to besiege the Academy resource points of Void and Annihilation, and incidentally take over those 2 vacant resource points. The larger group marched toward Richard's resource point. A sizable number indeed. Richard observed the White Wizard army on the ground, the forces coming to besiege him amounted to a staggering 1,600. And the White Wizard camp, after the first day's great battle, followed by the attacks of the Black Wizards, was left with just over 2,700. The White Wizard army formed up in battle lines, neatly surging towards the resource point. A large number of magic pets were released to scout ahead for ambushes. We've entered the trap zone, Richard murmured. For months the Black Wizard camp had not been idle, with Richard arranging for the alchemy apprentices to set up countless magic array traps in the dense forest. These devices individually didn't pack much of a punch, but chained together, they were definitely sufficient to give the White Wizards trouble. Boom! The magic array traps detonated, blasting a few White Wizard apprentices into pieces instantly. These apprentices, sent to trigger the traps, were each an expert at hide and seek. The White Wizard army's magic pet forces failed completely to find their traces. Traps, halt the advancement. Ori issued the command, and the whole White Wizard army stopped in the thick woods. Trigger-based traps. Ori's lips curved into a cold smile. On my order, forward, carpet-style casting, prepare the fireball technique. Fire. Instantly, hundreds of fireballs fell on the woods in front of the White Wizard army, and in a moment, the entire forest became a sea of flames, the magic array traps set by the alchemy apprentices detonating or becoming ineffective. These are a bit troublesome, Richard remarked, watching the now wiser White Wizard army, feeling somewhat regretful. Had he known it would end up like this, he wouldn't have placed so many traps in the woods. The White Wizard army continued advancing, stepping on the charred earth after the spell bombardment, slowly pushing toward the resource point. Without the magic array trap, Richard had no other good ways to drain their resources, he could only wait for the White Wizard army to enter his firing range. Bring it over. Richard gestured behind him, and two apprentices came to his side with a black cylinder striped with silver lines. He was now on the city walls, with close to 400 Black Wizard apprentices evenly distributed among the various defense measures. "Boss, are we using it now?" one apprentice asked nervously. These days, following Doug, they had been working on Richard's secret weapon in a corner of the resource point. Thus, they had a deeper understanding of these weapons than other wizard apprentices. They knew exactly how terrifying the weapons they had created were. "No rush, wait for the White Wizard army to get closer," Richard said nonchalantly. After a while, the White Wizard army had advanced within 3 kilometers of the resource point. "Boss, is the distance enough now?" inquired the apprentice again. Richard nodded. "Enough, let's test fire a few dummy rounds first, to calibrate the position." "Yes!" the apprentice shouted excitedly. In the dense forest, the White Wizard army inched forward with barrages of spells, eradicating any ambush in the face of their firepower. Suddenly, a black metal block fell from the sky. "What's that?" Defensive wizards tensely raised their magic barriers, blocking the metal block on the outside. But the metal block showed no signs of activity, devoid of any magic fluctuation. An apprentice handed the object to Ori for inspection. A metal block that fell from the sky. Ori stared at the metal block before him, puzzled. With his knowledge, he could not discern the use of this object. "Balto, take a look." Balto took the metal block and scanned it with his magic equipment. "Apart from its odd shape, it's just a plain metal block," Balto concluded. "This is really strange." Ori muttered to himself, "Why would the Black Wizards launch a metal block that's completely useless?" Launch. Hearing this word, a glimmer of insight flashed through Balto's mind. He suddenly remembered seeing something of a similar shape in his mentor's books. "Ori, I have an uncertain idea," said Balto hesitantly. "The Black Wizards launching this thing might be to calibrate their trajectory." "Calibrate their trajectory? Are the Black Wizards using a super long-range magic weapon to wear us down?" Ori subconsciously deduced. Perhaps, Balto was a bit uncertain, but in front of defensive wizards, nothing can cause damage from such a distance, except for the military department's strategic magical devices. Whoosh! Another black shell landed on the defensive wizard's magic shield, and then, boom! The black shell instantly transformed into a burst of white light, followed immediately by a deafening explosion. Boom! The defensive wizard's apprentice was instantly turned to nothingness under the shell's force, and even the blast wave caused many apprentices to vomit blood and sustain heavy injuries. "What is this thing?" Ori watched in shock as all this unfolded. Weren't the defensive wizards supposed to have activated their magic barriers? How could they still suffer such heavy losses? But before his shock could subside, another shell fell. Boom! This shell differed from the previous one, it contained a small amount of additional material. As the shell exploded, numerous dark red metal jets sprayed from the explosion's core, instantly piercing through dozens of apprentices. Then came the third, and the fourth. Shells fell one after another, each with astonishing power. Under the effect of the annihilation bombs, the White Wizard army was forced to disperse their formation to minimize casualties. Meanwhile, Ori stood still, staring blankly at everything. How could such a weapon appear on a battlefield of apprentices? He was not alone with this question. A powerful will descended upon the secret realm. In an instant, it froze the space and time of the entire battlefield, and with a wave of his hand, he gathered in the shells. Then his voice reached every apprentice's ears on the battlefield. "I am the head of Clear Frost Wizard Academy, Great Wizard Qing Shuang. Due to some accidents, this war has now ceased, and all apprentices will be teleported out of the secret realm in 3 minutes. After that, the powerful will disappeared into the secret realm with Richard.